there's a profound legitimacy to our own systems. And we can only open ourselves to these systems if we do our inner work, which will also involve critically examining the consequences of colonization. Colonization has impacted us massively, psychologically and sociologically. In terms of the challenges, I want to discuss one important matter. I do not know how much it has been discussed, but I personally think that this is something which has been impacting the Indian knowledge system in the universities in India on a big scale. And right away, I would actually want to dive into the consequences of colonization, because it's basically colonization, which first ruined the teaching and the pursuit of these knowledge systems. And then once the political independence was achieved, these knowledge systems have not really been able to find their way into the Indian university system in a very big way. The process has started. We have started doing some work in this area. But I personally think that, the consequences of colonization have to be understood in great detail in order to basically re-entrench these knowledge systems into the curriculum in Indian universities. I have not been following the lectures, so I do not know, if the landmark decision of Macaulay in 1835 has been discussed or not. But that was the period when there was a decisive direction which was given to the colonial rule. Before that, as many of you would know, in 1784, Asiatic Society had been established in Calcutta. And the reason for establishing that society was because the Britishers wanted to understand India, its customs and traditions, in order to rule India as per the customs and traditions of the nation. This was an important principle in the earlier times. Interestingly, even the imperial Romans believed in this principle. So what they were doing was something not in contradiction to their culture or their aspiration. So the translations that began in 1784 of the Indian texts, that was basically undertaken to help the imperial nation, which was Britain at this point in time, to understand India in order to rule it effectively. This fact is known to a lot of people. But what is not known to a lot of people, including academics, is that these translations had massive impact and effect in the reorganization of the British culture, of the British society. It may be surprising to many of you that in 1800s, there was literally no democracy in England, none whatsoever. England was basically ruled by a very few people through combination of monarchy and aristocracy. In effect, what you had was that there were very few people ruling the many, and the many literally had no voice or participation in governance, because of which there was mass scale oppression of the people who did not have any voice. You will also be surprised to know that education was available to only very few people, to people who belonged to the class of clergy and to people who belonged to aristocracy. It was not available to the masses at all. In fact, the movement to bring education at a mass level in England was inspired by a gentleman who had traveled extensively in southern India and had put together a school by the name of Madras School of Orientalism when he went back to England. The name of this person was Andrew Bell. And around 1811 or so, there was this massive movement which was started by an individual by the name of Lancaster, who wanted to proliferate education. Around this time, there was also a movement which was started to induct or induce democracy into the system. And in 1832, Britain actually underwent massive parliamentary reforms. And that was the beginning of democracy in England. So there were two things, which were simultaneously happening. And these things have not really been studied, due to the presence of historians of a certain orientation in India. What has happened is that the drain of wealth has been extensively studied and written about. But the cultural consequences of colonization hasn't really been spoken about. And these consequences are deep, and they will have to be understood and addressed at a massive level if you really want to align your pedagogy to the transformation of India. See, there are two ways of going about the profession in which we are involved. One is that we take it as jobs, come to the classes, teach, go back home. The other is to inspire ourselves and inspire the students that we are teaching so that we can actually bring about massive changes within the society. And when I look at the reformulation of the British society or the reinvigoration of the British society, I find that there were only a handful of people who were actually involved in this reform. There are not one too many people. These people were called the radicals. That was the name that they chose for themselves at that point in time. Now, apart from writing extensively and engaging themselves in political movements, this group, which called itself radicals, also in 1825 put together a university, which goes by the name of University of London now. And you will be surprised that this university was constructed in opposition to Oxford and Cambridge. Why did these people put together this university? They put together this university because the things that they were engaged in and the writings that they were doing were not really taught at Oxford and Cambridge. What I'm trying to emphasize over here is the value of education. Education and universities, they have been involved in the rise and fall of civilizations, if we really look at history. In 11th century CE, there was a movement which was started in Europe. It goes by the name of scholastic movement. This scholastic movement led to the establishment of some of these renowned universities that you find in Europe. Oxford University, Cambridge University, University of Paris, Barcelona University, and a few others. Now, if you connect the dots together, what you will find is that these universities were put together, and in the next 300 to 400 years, the countries in which these universities were established, they started rising, and they started rising big time. Similarly, when you look at the situation in the United States, most of the well-known universities were actually put together in 1600s and 1700s. And within a span of 300 years, United States began to become a world power. Conversely, it is in 12th century, or rather at the close of the 12th century, when universities in India began to get destroyed. And I think when something of huge significance in terms of creativity or creative work, which India can be very proud of, came around that period. The decline of the universities led to the decline of the civilization. And it was not just Nalanda University which was decimated. There were many universities that were razed to the ground. What is the evidence that I have? When you look at the travelogue of Xuanzang, you will find that in the areas in which he traveled, there were numerous colleges and universities. There's a particular term that he uses, for the description of these institutions. There were Sangramas. And if you really translate Sangrama in the current context, you will be able to safely say that they were like seminaries. So you basically had a monastery, and attached to the monastery, you had a college where education of different kind happened. So, what I'm trying to emphasize here is that it is only by taking back the universities and the educational system that we will be able to reinvigorate our civilization. There's a connection. History throws a connection, and it is important that we critically look at that connection. Now, going back, to where I was earlier. In 1835, when the Britishers brought their own education policy into the Indian context, it is not that they simply ruined what was in existence. And even till that time, what was in existence was massive. I do not know how many of you are familiar with the writings of Dharampalji on this account. If you are not, his Beautiful Tree is definitely a text which I would recommend. And in Beautiful Tree, Dharampalji is basically quoting the survey of the Britishers, which were conducted between 1822 and 1825 in southern India. And even in this period, the Britishers found, 4 to 5 schools in every village. And there was at least one college per 5 or 6 villages. Education was available to all sections of the society, to all quote unquote castes. It's not that, the education was controlled by the Brahmins and the education was only for the Brahmins. That's not what the data suggests. And this data, as I was telling you, was not collected or collated by Indians. This data was collected by the Britishers. So, the introduction of the new education policy started ruining what was in existence. And 1850s onwards, the Britishers started establishing their own institutions. If my research is correct, I think it was Elphinstone College, which was established in Mumbai or Bombay back then, as the first educational institution. And over a period of time, different universities in what are metropolitan cities in India came about. So the Britishers simultaneously, they were also creating knowledge on India. And the knowledge that they were creating on India, particularly on Indian society, was not being created based on their objective study of the objective situation in India. That was happening. They were creating knowledge on India based on the experiences of their own country. And I'm going very slowly about this. As I mentioned earlier, Britain was a class-based society in 1800s. And it was such a kind of a society in which people could not move from one class to the other. It was a very, very stratified social system that they actually had. Why am I telling you this? The reason why I'm telling you this is that when they started writing about castes in India, or the relationship of quote unquote castes in India, they were not talking about what really existed on the ground in India. They were actually projecting their class experiences onto the Indian context. This is what they were doing. And they were creating narratives on India. These narratives, which were getting created in Britain, were getting funneled into the Indian education system. It became part of the pedagogic narrative. And over a period of time, The falsehoods that they fed to us, they became our realities. This is just one part of the story. First, they created the narrative. Based on that narrative, later, they started bringing structural changes in India. They started altering and transforming our social system in a very, very big way. At this point in time, anyone who's sensitive enough will be able to understand that the Indian society has become deeply hierarchical and oppressive. That is the reality that we have in India. That is the reality that we find on the streets. That is the reality to which most Indians are actually subjected. Did we civilizationally behave in this particular way? My study suggests no. This was not the reality. The reality was something very different. However, through the educational institutions that they created and the alterations that they brought about in the society, our society has become completely transformed. And in fact, if you look at the current social system, if you look at the current social reality, it will match with the narrative that they had generated. But this reality is an outcome of that narrative. This reality does not precede the narrative. This is something which we really need to take into account. I'm talking about the consequences of colonization. So there are two things that I've already touched upon. One is that the colonial narrative found its entry into our educational system. As time progressed, it gathered a certain momentum. And post-colonial and post-independent India has not done anything of significance to basically alter or reduce the momentum. It has become a juggernaut. It started rolling and it continues to roll. How are we going to stop what began in 1800s? It is only through critical examination and a massive critical examination of what really has transpired during the colonial period that we will first understand what happened and then undo the damage that has occurred. The impact of colonization, unfortunately, it's most on the psyche of the colonized. That is where the maximum damage happens. And if you look at post-colonial literature, there are three consequences of colonization in the colonized. Sorry. It produces inordinate amount of inferiority complex, shame, and guilt. And before I get into epistemologies and deeper discussions, I want to begin with something which is very simple. Let me talk about the inferiority that we as civilization, we as a collective have towards languages. Most of us, at some level, have a certain degree of inferiority and shame about our native tongue. Most of my education happened in Delhi University. And when I survey the scene, I remember very vividly, and I do not think that the situation has changed today, even. The students who studied Sanskrit and Hindi were not considered cool, or they were not looked up to. You know, their peers derided them explicitly or implicitly. That is the reality. And I think the reality continues. On the contrary, if someone spoke English, and if he or she was good at the language, it really did not matter, whether that person was talking intelligently or not. The person was considered intelligent. And all doors back then opened for those individuals, and doors still open for the individuals in India today. The situation has not changed. Now, when you have something going like this within the civilization, do you think that people are going to talk about the Indian knowledge system? Yeah. Do you think that they're going to study the knowledge systems which are there in the vernaculars? This is not going to happen. So there is, at the civilizational level, this inquiry needs to happen. When I go back to India, and given that Hindi is my mother tongue, my native tongue, and I'm very fluent in Hindi, I'm also very fluent in my dialect. I like to have conversations with people in Hindi. But the moment they get to know that, that I'm living in the United States, people want to have conversation with me in English. The language has become a matter or reflection of civilization. There's this intellectual by the name of Albert Memmi. And Albert Memmi has written this wonderful book titled The Colonizer and the Colonized. And in The Colonizer and the Colonized, Memmi talks about bilingualism. Memmi says that there's nothing wrong with bilingualism or multilingualism. But when language, particularly the language of the colonizer, begins to acquire a particular status and begins to supersede all the different native languages, then there's a problem. And that problem needs to be addressed. I do not know, how many of you read the 2 book chapters that I shared with you. In both the chapters, I've quoted Benjamin Whorf. Benjamin Whorf says that the language itself carries a cosmology. Language is not just words. It has a worldview. It has a cosmology. It has a culture. It has the wisdom of the ancestors embedded in it. And there is a very unconscious transmission of cosmology and culture and worldview which occurs through language. When we were growing up, we learned language through osmosis. Nobody taught us our native, our respective native tongues, right? We just picked them up. So there's a process of osmosis over there. And with language, we also pick up cosmology. And if surrounding us, we have the language of the colonizer, then we begin to pick up the cosmology of the colonizer as well. And when we begin to pick up the cosmology of the colonizer, it is not that we are seamlessly negotiating in two different worlds, the worlds of colonized and colonizers. No, that doesn't happen. We begin to get attracted towards the culture, the civilization, and the worldview of the colonizer. And more we get connected with that, more disconnected we become from our own tradition, culture, tradition, and so on and so forth. Now, this is a massive challenge that we face. And I think that is also the reason why I'm pretty much sure that a lot of you will have a lot of difficulty about talking to your peers or your colleagues about the Indian knowledge systems. There is a certain kind of conscious or unconscious uncivilization which is associated with the Indian knowledge systems. There's a certain kind of savagery, conscious or unconscious, which is associated with these knowledge systems. And to the best of my understanding, it is unconscious. So if you suddenly become interested in studying Sanskrit, or if you're interested in engaging in some ancestral practices, you will be very casually referred to as bhaktas. Your intellectual acumen or your intellectual capacities will be brought into question. Let me give you another example. It is deliberate on my part to be dressing in the manner that I have dressed and come to this class. I could have easily worn a dhoti kurta and come to the class. And it is highly possible that, that I would not have been taken seriously. Now, there are many scholars in India at this point in time who may not be proficient in English. They may not be dressing themselves in Western clothing, but they may have very good command over different aspects of the traditional Indian knowledge systems. Do these people have the respect in the society? We don't give them that respect. I'm not saying we, I'm not talking about, this group. I'm pretty much sure that many of us may be doing that, but I'm talking about civilization. If an individual in traditional clothing, particularly a man, without an entourage around himself, goes to what can be considered as an elite place, it is highly possible that the individual may get disrespected. This is the reality that our country is facing. So I would say that before we start getting into epistemology and the technical stuff, which of course are very important, these are the things that we should be noticing. And more than noticing what is going on in the society, it becomes extremely pertinent and imperative to look into the things that we ourselves are doing. What is the value that we attach to things that are considered Western? Now, because of this deep inferiority that we have civilizationally, and I'm not berating ourselves for this, this is a consequence of colonization. All colonized people have this. They undergo this, this comes with the territory. This is the nature of the beast. Colonization worldwide has created inferiority complex, shame, and guilt among the colonized. And if we want to transform this unconscious thing, which is running inside our being, first will have to be made conscious and then changed. Because if we do not change this, then what happens? What happens is that whatever gets generated in Western universities, that becomes putative truth, which gets uncritically swallowed by us. We don't even question that. We don't even critically examine that. If we do not critically examine what is coming from the West, we won't be able to look into what is there in our own backyard. These two book chapters that I shared with you, I've shared them for a reason. What is it that I start with? I start critically examining, dominant Western paradigms through a methodology which actually brings me to the second concern that we have, methodological issues. Through a methodology which is also Western, right? And given and from here on, I would be pretty much certain that that you would be very familiar with the lingo that I'm going to speak. You'll be familiar with modernism. We'll be familiar with Enlightenment. We'll be familiar with postmodernism and so on and so forth. So what is it that I'm doing? I use the paradigm of postmodernism, postmodern philosophy of science, to be precise, to critique the paradigm of Enlightenment and modernism, right? So in a certain sense, you can say that I'm using one thorn to take out another thorn. And then, by the grace of the divine, and I have no qualms in saying that, because it actually is the gift of the divine, I turn postmodernism onto itself. particularly in the sections where I'm talking about relativism and the paradox of self-referentiality. That incidentally, again, by the grace of the divine, it's my novel contribution in the world of philosophy. When I apply postmodernism on postmodernism, there's something wonderful and peculiar that happens. Postmodernism swallows itself, right? But when it swallows itself, I am not using to bring up or uplift the paradigm of modernism or enlightenment. That is not what I'm doing. What I'm showing in those two pieces is the complete collapse of binaries, true, false, right, wrong, and so on and so forth. And through that, I open a new door into looking at Indian epistemology. So what did I do? I used one thorn to take out another thorn and then threw both the thorns away. And with that, what is it that I am doing? I am landing in something which is distinctively Indian epistemology. The transcendence of binaries is where the fun in our epistemology begins. Let me shed more light into this, given that you guys have been exposed, to many different knowledge traditions in the last 10 or 15 days. From the perspective of Vedanta, mind is not a singular entity. Mind has 4 different aspects to it. Mind has chitta, mind has manas. In fact, it is not even called mind, it is called antakaran, and an inner instrument of perception. It has chitta, which can be loosely associated with unconscious or subliminal mind. You have manas, or that aspect of mind which is attached to sense organs. Then you have buddhi, which is the discerning faculty within you. And very closely associated with buddhi, you have ahankara, the ego principle or the principle of self. And between buddhi and ahankara, there's almost a reciprocal relationship. Now look at this, look at how logical this whole system is. When you are making a discernment, you will always operate in binaries. Think about this. When you're applying your vivek or your buddhi, right? You will choose right from wrong, true from false, and so on and so forth. Discerning faculty belongs to buddhi, and buddhi essentially operates in binaries. Now, buddhi is part of the antakaran conglomerate, which is just one of the planes of consciousness. There are many more planes of consciousness beyond mind. Those planes of consciousness have to be experienced in pursuit of knowledge in our systems. And there's a particular reason why I'm using systems here. Transcendence of mind is there in Vedanta, in Buddhism, in Jainism, in Sikhism, and in Sufism. transcendence of mind is a must. And in order to transcend the mind, it is very important that you transcend dichotomies and dualities. You transcend your buddhi. And because your ego principle, your ahankara, is very closely entwined with buddhi, as you transcend binaries and dichotomies, there's a profound suppleness which is going to come in your ahankara principle. So there are two ways of making buddhi malleable. Either become truly humble, or work on your buddhi, which is going to make your ahankara supple. And through this process, this part of the inner work, this part of our sadhana, that we transcend the mind. And when you transcend the mind, you are not looking for knowledge in an intellectual manner. You are looking for knowledge in what can be considered as yogic manner, spiritual manner. All that you need to do in that process is to basically silence your mind, attain a certain kind of stillness. And once that stillness comes, knowledge descends upon you. You become an instrument, you become a conduit. And that is why, the profound and copious literature that you have in our tradition has actually flowed through the beings who were doing their sadhana. This pursuit of knowledge is not intellectual. You're not putting two and two together. You're working on your being. You're engaging in psycho-spiritual practices. As you raise yourself, knowledge descends into you. You become a scribe of the divine. It is stated that Mahabharata has been written by Vyasa with Ganesha as his scribe. The Westerners are not able to wind their head around this, that one individual could actually write a text of 100,000 verses. Once the Germans started studying our tradition, they began saying that, that Mahabharata or different parts of Mahabharata has been written by many different people. No. There's one individual, one Vyas, who wrote this. And he wrote it because he used Sri Ganesha as a scribe. This can happen to us also. This is the kind of epistemology that we are talking about. What I wanted to say to you is that there's a profound legitimacy. There's a profound legitimacy to our own systems. And we can only open ourselves to these systems if we do our inner work, which will also involve critically examining the consequences of colonization. Colonization has impacted us massively, psychologically and sociologically. It has transformed our culture, our society in a very big way. I think, to us as teachers, there's a certain responsibility. We can reform the society. We can undo the damage if we actually engage in an activity, something of this kind. So having said that, let's open it up
Okay, it was really a great session. I was listening very intently, and the whole thing that how you related uh, with the growth of the universities and the growth of the entire civilization, and how those institutions were damaged, and that led to the decline in the whole thing. And also the whole thing you also mentioned about the British Raj, their caste system, and how that got transmitted into our society, and the feeling of inferiority and all that is very, very eye-opening. And though I'm also quite a well-read person, but I have been hearing such thing for the first time. So I'm very grateful to you, first of all. And the thing which you were sharing towards the end, that it is all about coming out of that, the belief system, which is very, very uh, defeatist and something, you are not good enough. Because, we are what we believe we are. And I'm from Lucknow, and I also had studied till class 12th or even later in Hindi medium. Later on, I went on, to change the medium, and my all inferiority went away when I became a Fulbright scholar, and we were taken to the White House, and then my group chose me to represent India and to speak about India and share about Mahatma Gandhi. And I did that, and then I discovered a new me in myself, and after that, there was no looking back. So your talk also has created a similar impact, where we need to believe in, what we were, what we are, and not creating an incremental mindset, like 10% growth, 20%, rather on a blank canvas, paint something totally new and let that vision empower us to pull us over there. And but in order to create that pride and everything, firstly, we need to be self-aware. We need to be filled with, a lot of self-respect and self-love and a feeling of, the being the guru and, spreading the light over there. So these are some thoughts which came to my mind. And I just thought to express my gratitude to you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, in fact, the thought which is coming to my mind is that because of, because of the inferiority that we have developed because of colonization, we need the validation of the white man.
Yeah.
It is so sad. It's so sad. And again, when I'm discussing all these things, I'm not berating us. What I'm saying is that this is natural. This comes with the territory. This is the nature of the beast. This is how it has happened. This has happened, all across the world where people got colonized.
Yeah.
And in fact, for people who are interested in knowing about the psychological consequences of colonization, I would recommend the writings of Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon has written, in fact, he's written 4 books. 2 of them are really good. Black Skin, White Masks, and Wretched of the Earth. He also wrote A Dying Colonialism. But the first 2 that I enumerated, they're really good.
Great.
And they go into great details with respect to the consequences of colonization. This man was pretty interesting. He actually died at the age of 36. He was born in West Indies, in the Caribbean islands, in Martinique, which was a French territory. And then he came to France to study. He became a psychiatrist. And then he was posted in Algeria, during the time when the Algerian War of Independence had actually started. And he became part of the Algerian War of Independence. And it was in that phase that he caught leukemia, and he knew that he was going to die. And the Wretched of the Earth was actually written about 3 months or so. It's an inspired piece of work. And I would say that, when you would go through that text, you will find the relevance of the text for us in the current times on a massive scale. And towards the end of the text, this individual is talking about bottom-up democracy, And interestingly, if I go through the writings of Sri Aurobindo, bottom-up democracy was actually existent in India. Democracy is not alien to India.
Yeah.
I'm doing a lot of work in this particular field. So at some point in time, when it becomes completely developed, I will share it with you all. But India has had its own form of democracy, and it is basically because of that amongst the post-colonial nations, India is the only country which has had an almost seamless run with democracy. If you take the brief period of emergency out, India has had a successful run with democracy, and it's going to have its presence. Democracy is going to have its presence. It's not going to go away.
Right.
And interestingly, this is not a Western implant.
Right.
By this very brief example, what I'm trying to tell you is that, that the Britishers not only changed our society significantly, they have also completely subverted the understanding of our own past.
Yeah. That is true.
To such an extent that we continue to look at our ancient past through the lens which was established by the Britishers.
Yeah.
And if I go into the history, I know of the individual who did this work. His name was James Mill. James Mill, in 12 years, wrote 3 volumes, of history of British India, and through that work, completely changed the representation of Indian history. If we'll have time, I will talk about it, but I think this is the time to take responses and questions and comments. So I'll park this for the time being. I'll come to it later. But,
Dr. Singh, I also want to add one small thing, if you may allow me.
Please. Yeah.
I'd also like to share one work by Mr. Sharad Kumar. He has been my former mentor, and he was a Gyanpith Award winner. So he created a book, The British Raj, The Lessons to be Learned from British in Managing a Big Empire. So he shared about, their dressing sense, why they were living in Kent, and creating a feeling of superiority that, we are white skinned and you are inferior and all that. So he created an art that how very small number of men, how they were able to manage such a big land like India. So I will see if, unfortunately, he is no more. He was earlier the chairman of IMT Ghaziabad, which is a top business school in India.
Yeah.
So he was actually working on the new edition, but somehow before that he left us. So that also he has, I will try to find out that volume, and maybe will share with Rishaji. So
that would be wonderful. I would love to have a copy. I really appreciate it if it's there.
So in this way, the efforts were made that you are useless, you are there because of us, and all the new thing, good practices, the culture, etiquettes, manners, they have come from us only. So in this way, trying to paint a picture which was very far from the truth. So I think we need more and more discussion and some solid work so that we can reclaim our rightful place in the human history.
And and these things, they basically need to start from small things. I have a whole concentration on post-colonial Hindu studies at the Hindu University of America. And in one of my classes, I asked my students this question, which was, how many of you can actually go to restaurants here in the United States, or 5-star hotels in India. Go to the bathroom, wash your hands, come to the table, and eat your food with fingers.
Okay.
And I said, if you cannot do it, or rather, that is the time when you really need to study what is going on within. That will be very symptomatic of the shame and the inferiority that we have acquired, because it has been fed to us that eating, with utensils is something which is civilized, and eating with fingers is not. Whereas, it's like we are great with hygiene. You wash your hands, you eat your food, and it is also said that when food touches the tips of your fingers, you salivate, and that adds to the taste of the food.
Yeah. Yeah.
One enjoys one's food more if one eats with fingers.
Yeah.
There's some scientific study which has been done on this.
Sure.
But despite what I'm saying is, see, going into epistemology and Sanskrit and technicalities and all of that, is very, very important. But the march has to begin with taking these baby steps. And these baby steps are very, very important.
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So my question is, you told that you have to be the instrument. Our mind has to work in a higher level of consciousness when you want to deliver something to the students. But if you want to implement now for the new education system, what is the method we are going? First, we have to train our faculties. Now, how are we going to go about training our faculties to taking them to the higher planes? It's going to be definitely a challenging one. So I think psychology is necessary for taking this teaching profession. And what do you think about this? And how do we go about to face this challenge?
Yeah, see, I would say that before we start training or teaching others, we have to train and teach ourselves.
Yes, sir.
It will have to begin with us, right? We have
Yes.
to do the inner work.
Yes, sir.
And I
The inner
personally
work
feel
is
that
already going on, sir. I'm working
but
with...
see, ma'am, what I'm saying is that, once you are done with this inner work,
Okay.
it's, you yourself will be, or as you're doing this inner work, you'll be able to transmit.
Okay.
People who are in a ready, receptive state of affairs will be able to receive what you have to give.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
See,
what I'm saying is that it's very important that as teachers, as educators, if we are able to align our pedagogy with a higher principle, which involves inner and outer transformation, I think everything else will become easy and natural and normal.
Yes.
The transformation first has to happen within ourselves.
Okay.
That's how I feel it.
Okay.
One begins to embody it, I think this inner work is also very infectious, it's contagious.
Why, sir?
See, because if you don't walk your talk, if you don't live the words that you are, that are going to come from your being,
okay,
you'll be found out. We teachers get found out. But if we live these words, our being is in alignment with the words.
Yes.
And there's a very benign kind of a power that comes with those words. That's what I feel.
Okay.
I always think that, that in order for things to happen around me, I have to do the work on myself first.
Okay.
At least that is what is within my hands.
Okay.
I can share my experience with you. This is what I do.
Okay.
Rest, everything follows.
Okay. Thanks for your insights, sir.
Thank you.
And I'll try to follow this.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
This wonderful session, and thank you for the chapters that you have shared with us. I would like to share two things. One, my personal experience with my research. I was working on Commons, Learning Commons, and I wouldn't name the university, but one of the prestigious social science research universities in India. I did my PhD from there. And when I was, when I started putting forward my research, the ethnography of my institute, because it's a spiritual institute. I was just trying to say, like, what makes it easy for us to come with a concept of commons at my university, that, how people over here.
Concept of what?
Commons.
Commons, okay.
Yeah.
Jana, you mean?
Yes.
Jana, right.
So, like, I was just trying to say, like, why it is the ethnography of my university. I was just trying to share, like, what is the ethnography of my university and why Atmiyata, the university that I come from, Atmiya University, and the propounder, like, the kind of ecosystem we have, and that instinctively makes us to come together as a Jana. They just stopped me and they said, please wait. First of all, they didn't want me to acknowledge from where did it come, because they said we cannot accept anything, you're overwhelmed with this idea, but it is not scientific. So I was refrained from that. And then my whole base is to tell them why it is possible. I had to, it just collapsed because I didn't see anything else, which was so, what you can say, like, which could basis to come. Yeah. So it made me think, like, why these things are not, why I'm not able to put it scientifically. One, because they want it scientifically. Second thing that I want to share is we are having Universal Human Values program, which is the.
May I interject for a moment? I just want to respond to the beautiful thing that you said, and then we'll continue the dialogue, so I hope that's okay with you. So, see, I personally feel, given, this dichotomy, between science and superstition that almost the entire educational scene in India is struggling with or using it. I think it is very important for, educators like us to know philosophy of science in great detail. In those two chapters, or rather book chapters, there's a slice of this. I personally feel that if we become familiar with the writings of Thomas Kuhn and Paul Feyerabend, if not Karl Popper and Emre Lakatos, even these two people, they will give us the wherewithal to address scientism, which is prevalent in academia in a very big way. Science in academia at this point in time has become like religion. It's a club, to beat people with when you do not agree with a particular contention. It's not scientific, it is superstitious, and so on and so forth, without even trying to understand, what the other person is trying to tell you. So I think, as part of the work that we are doing, understanding a bit of philosophy of science will be very helpful. The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn is a very lucid read. Against Method by Paul Feyerabend is also very lucid. Both these books can be followed, or rather they can be gone through, without much problem. So, I just wanted to add to what you were saying. So Please continue.
The second issue that we are facing right now is, like we have the value education for consciousness development as one of our courses. And we see a lot of transformation in the students, in terms of getting serious with their careers, or, by bonding with their families, having a better culture in the university. But when we say, like, this is what is making the things easy for us, to take bigger endeavors, rather than just dealing with discipline throughout the year, we are able to do better because the discipline is already taken care of. But when we try to portray this to the accrediting institutions or to organizations who come, for accreditation or something, they just don't want to. They don't want us to highlight that. They say, like, give us figures, give us the
numbers.
Analysis. Yes. I mean, so what I feel is, like, how do I analyze trust? How do I analyze, a concept called bhaiband, in Gujarati? How do I conceptualize that? It is beyond friendship. It is beyond, so I'm not able to, like, why people are coming together to do projects in Gujarat. We have that bonding, whether it is community or, I'm not able to explain the concept of friendship versus bhaiband. I'm not able to come out with those because they are so culturally rooted, but how do I scientifically prove them? And when you see, they are the nerve of our society. And that's why we're able to optimally perform, outperform. We are able to bind together. The team effect is a lot in Gujarat, but I'm not able to tell them that this is the underlying current for it. I'm not able to conceptualize it. So these are difficult things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the work will have to be done in this area. And I think, Western epistemology has to be thoroughly critiqued. See, I told you about transcendence of binaries, in these two book chapters. There's another book chapter of mine which is in production right now, and what I'm just going to share is basically encapsulated in that one. There's another thing which happens when binaries get created, and I've studied Western philosophy significantly well in order to say this with some degree of responsibility. Whenever a binary gets created, one half of the binary gets privileged and the other gets suppressed. This is the nature of the operation of binaries. Now, what you're getting confronted with is basically this dichotomy, between subjective and objective. And this individual, or this accreditation agency, which said to you whatever it said to you, what it is doing I think to the best of my understanding, unconsciously, that it is privileging objective and completely suppressing the subjective. The bhaibanda that you are talking about, is in the realm of the subjective. The subjective in this epistemology has been completely suppressed. So this guy or this fool, will basically tell you, that you give me numbers. I don't really understand. I don't want to do anything with subjectivity. And that is the difficulty that you're facing. All the concepts that you spoke about, that falls in the realm of subjective, and subjective in the subjective or objective dichotomy has been suppressed. And because it has been suppressed, it does not really have any voice. It doesn't have any voice, That is the problem that we are encountering. And that is why, in terms of epistemology, we really need to understand Western epistemology very well. Maybe in the next couple of years, I'll come up with a book which will be titled Comparative Epistemology, where I'm going to compare, Indian epistemologies with Western epistemologies, and this fact is going to come out quite significantly, out. But this is basically what happens, In in the dichotomy of subjective and objective, because subjective has been suppressed and objective privileged, that this person is posing the questions that he or she is posing to you. You know, does that make sense? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, how are you, Dr. Singh? I loved your talk.
Thank you.
I glanced through your articles, but it will take a little time because you're talking about philosophy of science. I need to reread them. So I agree with largely everything you say, but I have one fundamental objection, which is, we need to include in this overview resistance to the colonizer. I'm saying this not only because Spivak talks about it, or Sumit Sarkar or Goa, but in one's own experience, there was a lot of resistance, agency. Now, just one example I'll take, not from peasants and landlords and all that, industrial workers, I'll take from science. 1881, the bacteria was first displayed at Grant Medical College, Bombay. Okay, modern medicine coming in. And there was a lot of debate, a lot of voices saying this is a Christian bacteria, you want to colonize. And Gandhi himself, was so put off by this, what he thought was this link of medicine as a tool of empire, that he had a very problematic relation with modern science. Problematic. But, there was a lot of fighting back. And we see this throughout. So would it not also be good to say that, the colonizer was not all powerful. He ravaged our systems, but we fought back. Because if you don't say that, in so many fields, we fought back because we've survived. If you don't say that, are we not representing ourselves as more colonized, more subject than we actually were? If you get my point.
That's a very good point. I'm getting your point very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Not that I have not given thought to this. In fact, in the colonizer and the colonized, Memi talks about two responses. He talks about assimilation, and he also talks about resistance. I think I generally spoke about assimilation. I did not talk so much about resistance. Yes, resistance happened. I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but resistance was to what was considered Western, and within that context, our responses were being framed. So the dominant discourse still is Western, even if you are resisting. If the playground, is for cricket, right? And if you enter into it, and if you're, if you turn it into a baseball game, you're still playing largely the game of cricket. In order to play your own game, you'll have to transform it into a court of kabaddi, maybe. I'm just giving you a very loose example. What I'm saying is that even within that resistance, the dominant framework was Brit, and it was in response to that our responses were getting formulated.
Got it.
This is what the problem is. And unfortunately, there's a lot of hooliganism in the name of culture, which is going on in India at this point in time. I will be very candid and clear about it.
True.
In fact, the most uninformed of the people are basically talking about Indian culture. And usually, when they talk about Indian culture, it is in resistance or opposition to what is considered Western in their imagination. You get my point? Right? Like, I'll cite one more example, and probably it's a radical one.
Okay.
In post-colonial India at this point in time, if someone goes and draws pictures of sexual intercourse on temple walls, there will be a riot. There's a high possibility that there will be a riot. And probably the riot will be produced by people who will align themselves, with culture, and they will raise the battle cry of defending the culture. The reality is that we have had these depictions on the walls of India in the ancient times. I'm just giving you an example. Kama was something which was considered sacred. It was very much part of dharma, kam, moksha, the quartet, one of the three quartets that we really had. So what I'm saying is that even when you are resisting, but if the main framework is Western, you are not really creating anything Indian. You're still located in the boundaries of what can be considered Western. Does that address your concern?
What you've just said, Salman Rushdie has this very nice phrase, the empire writes back. So you are saying, get out of that discursive space because you'll always be caught up in it. I mean, get out of it. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Very nice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Got
Turn
it.
back on that. Back on that narrative. Turn back on the epistemology. Critique that epistemology, right? And then you produce your own. And there's another thing, which I'm teaching right now. There's one particular course that I'm teaching, which is titled "The Rise of Liberal Left in Britain." I won't go into too many details. I won't go into too many details. But India and Britain, are not two dichotomous entities. They are enmeshed. They are enmeshed. In the earlier stages of colonialism, India has influenced Britain in a very significant manner. And after, I would say perhaps, after 1857, Britain influenced India in a major way. So until and unless, this interchange or this exchange is deeply studied, it will be very difficult to say what is Indian and what is Brit. And because the British culture went worldwide, one can say Brit and Western. So intellectually, there's a lot of work that has to be done, and there has to be quality work that will have to be done. These are not matters of raising slogans. This is unfortunately what is happening in India. Bunch of scholars will have to sit, on their chairs or maybe on the floor and work for decades in order, for this knowledge to get generated. There's a lot of work that needs to happen.
Thank you.
So you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kundanji, for this nice discussion. Close that. I have absolutely right. Some of the points that you have made so far, the suppression of subjectivity in the Western epistemology. That is one aspect which I quite agree. And I have already started working on that, and I have introduced subjectivity in a mathematical framework into quantum theory during my PhD work. Of course, like Sheetalji was pointing out, my thesis was also facing a lot of trouble from the established academicians. And then somehow I got citations from abroad from some people in USA. Alexander Wundt has written a book, Ohio State University, Quantum Mind and Social Science. He gave many references in that book for citations to my work, which I did as a PhD student. I proposed one interpretation of quantum theory, which I have named psychophysical interpretation, where subjectivity enters alongside objectivity as a co-determiner of reality. So this I have done, and I have further also done a lot of works to bring the say power of the individual mind or the power of the meditative mind to bring about changes in physical systems. That also I have done, and I have mathematically incorporated that. And basically experiments by Dean Radin and his collaborators in the Noetic Sciences, Institute for Noetic Sciences. So that also I have provided a model. And so it is not that subjectivity cannot be brought in. I fully agree with you. We have to bring it in. And as you said, some decades of work is needed by scholars. I have done it, and my collaborator, Dr. Tripathi, is there. And we have worked to, say, upgrade Darwin's theory of evolution. That was the next one. We have done that also. So subjectivity, I mean, the role of the psyche in evolution, that we have tried to bring into picture in the scientific literature itself. And of course, the thing that you see, Vivekananda or Sri Aurobindo or Swami Sivananda, they all, whatever they all talked about our originality, like Sri Aurobindo's The Foundations of Indian Culture. If we take that, the way Sri Aurobindo has decimated, say, William Archer's arguments, so we can get enough inputs from the writings of those greats. And currently, the current generation does not really need to be reminded of their colonized past. They just need to be given the proper framework, proper curriculum, so that they can build on that, because they come not with that kind of colonial hangover. Our system has that hangover, but the new generation do not have. We are not putting them into that. So we must be aggressive. We must build upon whatever we have achieved. Like Kakarji said, we have fought back, and there is a lot of room now. Things are opening up, and we should cash in on. And really, as you said, we need a bunch of experts, and I call it, say, dual expertise personnel. Those who know Indian knowledge systems well and who know their own fields very well. So they can be from economics and Arthashastra. They can be experts in both. They can be from physics and Bhagavad Gita or Upanishads. They can be from chemistry and say Indian metallurgy. So we have to have sets of experts who are dual experts. So then, because our things are subjectivity rooted, Western things are objectivity rooted, and we have to have a middle course.
May I interrupt you for a bit, sir? Can we have a
just
dialogue?
let me finish. Just let me finish. I'll not just now. I'll finish. So our perspectives can be brought into scientific discourse and discourses in researches in other areas as well in a big way. If we have a planned setup in workshop 2, we are going to present that also, how we are to make moves. So I also went through your works, those conference presentations. So from that we have to move ahead from the days of Capra and all, who just tried to give some little rooms they made, and then we have to now cash in on
that work.
And
that work is let me interrupt you. For
I think it is now time for us.
Let me interrupt you a little bit
to spearhead.
That work was put together in 2002. Number one. Number two, when you talk about, our system being subjective, subject oriented, unfortunately, you are still operating in the subjective objective dichotomy. So I would say that the content of that paper has not been assimilated completely, because what I'm saying is that our epistemology essentially completely transcends binaries. So if we begin to say that our system is subjectivity oriented or subject oriented, we are still working on the West, within the paradigm of the Western world. This brings me to the point which I've been making right from the very beginning. Our education, because it has been Western right from the very beginning, the impact is very, very nuanced, and it will take a lot of critical self-reflexivity to get out of the influence of the Western paradigm. And this will mean that we understand Western paradigm absolutely thoroughly. And we also understand Indian epistemology absolutely thoroughly. Because if we do not understand both these epistemologies, there's a high likelihood that we will be transposing Western epistemology or Western paradigm or on our own knowledge system and continue to claim that whatever we are doing is basically Indian. So this is very, very important. I mean, understanding, or let me put it this way, understanding of Arthashastra in completeness will happen only if we understand the cosmology behind the Arthashastra. If we don't understand the cosmology behind the Arthashastra, there is an unwritten realm which is supporting Arthashastra. And that unwritten realm will have to be thoroughly studied in order to understand what Arthashastra is basically saying. So there's work that needs to be done, and needs to be done very, very seriously, Dr. Pradhan. And the disagreement that I have with you is that the Western framework or the Western paradigm is still very operational. It is still very dominant. And in order to completely transcend the influence of the Western paradigm, more work will be required on our part. That is the brief disagreement that I have with you. We are on the path. We are doing this. If we are not on the path, you and I would not have been having this conversation. We definitely do want to entrench the Indian knowledge systems, in our culture once again. And I think it's basically because of this that even the conversations are happening. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. But just one point. We are to bring back our culture into ourselves, our thinking, our systems. And we can also guide Western culture, Western thinking. That's what I'm saying. We can guide. It's not that I am saying some kind of, Indian supremacy or something.
Dr. Pradhan, if we actually study history, we have been influencing with the Western culture since antiquity.
Right.
We have had an influence on the Greeks.
Right.
We had influence, on the Britishers in the earlier period of the Indo-Brit exchange. We have influenced the United States in a very big way. There have been waves of influence on Western culture.
Yes.
So that has happened. But see, if you study in detail the influence, you'll find that the Western culture, because of its dominance, it interprets and reinterprets the Indian influence according to its own cosmological and political and social needs.
Exactly.
It's not that the ideas come from India and then they get transplanted in Western culture just like that.
Right.
They get reframed. They get reframed and reformulated.
Digestion. That Rajiv Malhotra ji calls digestion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
So
right.
they are
so
digesting.
Talks about appropriation and digestion. Right.
Exactly.
Right. So there's this complexity, and all these complexities will have to be understood. In the initial stages itself, I didn't go into the details, but what I'm saying is that the reformulation of the British society that happened, from 1800 to 1850 has largely been because of the Indian influence.
Yeah.
Has largely been because of the Indian influence.
That's right.
So we have certainly influenced them, right? But they do not talk about our influence, whereas we feel very proud, to talk about their influence.
Yes.
I'll give you an example and something, and something, to reflect on. Even when you were talking about your own research, you cited the names of so many Westerners. Why did you feel the need to do it?
That's because I have guided. I have really helped them. It's not that I have done some confirmatory research. No, I have helped them. I have introduced Bhagavad Gita. I have introduced the epistemology of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras to have a model for consciousness and to have a model for how meditators can influence physical systems. So that they were in the dark. And then Radin et al., they were bound to give me citations further in all their further works, that this is the only theoretical model that can explain psychophysical interactions.
But then they are talking about mind-body medicine already. So what is the new thing that you have done?
No, it's not medicine. I'm talking about doing things in physics. Mind-body medicine is a different area. I have not gone into that now, but I have done it in physics. In quantum physics, you talk about the role of the observer in your papers. So role of the observer, it has remained in that popular science level. Nobody really, except for Henry Stapp, nobody really gave any kind of model. And I have given a model. I am the only Indian to have given an interpretation of quantum theory, an independent interpretation of quantum theory, taking the psyche into the account. So see, from the objectivist to the subjectivist and to the transcendent, if we are to go somewhere, we have to have a meeting point. So I brought in the dualistic view, Sankhya view, subject and the object both, and then we can move beyond that. The reality, of course, is transcendental. So that's what is my take.
May I suggest one more one more way of looking at it?
Please.
From the Vedantic perspective, we have at least 5 planes. Anandmaya kosha, Vijnanmaya kosha,
Exactly.
Manomaya kosha, Pranamaya kosha, and Annamaya kosha, right? So if I interpret that, if I interpret your rendition, for the time being, within this framework, I would say that you are talking about the interaction between Manomaya kosha and Annamaya kosha, right?
Not exactly, because it is the Annamaya kosha of the universe. It's the Virat. How meditator influences a physical system outside himself by means of concentration. That's
right.
what.
But Dr. Pradhan, it is also a common Vedantic principle that what is there in the microcosm, it's there in the macrocosm.
That's right.
When I'm saying Annamaya kosha, I'm not
that
saying
can be done. Yes,
not Annamaya kosha within the individual.
Yeah, that's possible.
It's there in the cosmos. Right?
Absolutely, that's possible.
So,
right.
So if I interpret this research, within that framework,
mind-body medicine can be done.
One can say that you are talking about the interaction between Manomaya kosha and Annamaya kosha.
Yes.
What about Pranamaya kosha?
Yeah.
What about Vijnanamaya kosha? What about Anandamaya kosha? So there's there's still that paradigm that needs to be developed, and and once that, and given that this has come up,
that is right. That is right.
See, at this point in time in medicine, people are talking about mind-body medicine, in a very big way. Even our own Ayurveds, are trying to fit their system into mind-body medicine. And I am saying, not allopathy, I'm saying, in mind-body medicine, and I'm saying to them that we are doing a massive
disservice
by engaging in that, because whereas there has been mind-body dichotomy in Western epistemology for the longest period of time, and it is only recently that they have put mind and body in a dialectical relationship. And and all our Ayurvedics are basically going gaga, following them. What we can do, and rather, if we would have been true to our own epistemology, we would look at the system from the perspective of Vedanta. Because when you fit Ayurveda into mind and body, you still are leaving out 3 planes of existence, 3 profound planes of existence. Pranamaya kosha, Vijnanamaya kosha, and Anandamaya kosha. And Pranamaya kosha is a very important aspect of our being.
Exactly.
And if Pranamaya kosha, if Pranamaya kosha does not get addressed, then you encounter a lot of emotional problems, and those emotional problems basically have their manifestation in the body.
Yes.
And the roots of the problems within the body will never be found out, because the roots lie in Pranamaya kosha. So until and unless, we bring these 3 planes that we are skipping at this point in time, we will be limiting ourselves.
That is right. That is right. And what we are doing is
we will be restricting the vast canvas that we actually have.
That is right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Actually, about the Pranamaya Kosha, I have this particular view that if we are not going to propose something new from our, let's say, Vedantic paradigm, prana is something which connects the body with the mind. And this particular connecting link, if we can establish, we have to have research protocols, designs, a project such that we can establish prana. You see, there was the vital force theory, Alan Vital, long back, but they discarded it. Nobody now accepts the existence of prana even in a scientific setup. Although in yogic sciences and all, we are putting things like that, but nobody, because prana is not exactly measurable. So what kind of quantification of prana can be done? That can be a project which is to be taken up, maybe by people in the IKS fraternity.
No, actually, Dr. Pradhan, because there's some similarity in how prana is discussed and chi. The Chinese have actually developed instruments, to measure chi, and those instruments can actually be used, for research, dealing with prana. But see, there's one, the things that you're saying, are absolutely fabulous. I'm not discounting that. But what I'm saying is that in doing the kind of research that you are suggesting, the dominant paradigm, Dr. Pradhan, is still Western. It is still positivist. You see, it still does not, this paradigm still does not consider the paradigm that we have developed by yogis as scientific. These are the kind of internalizations that we do almost inadvertently. And these are the things that also need to be brought into question, as a part of self-reflexivity that I have been talking about. You see?
That's right.
Because, as long as we are using methods that have been developed within the West, to give legitimacy to what is quintessentially Indian, right? We are still operating within the Western paradigm, within the Western framework. I'm not saying that we should not engage in that kind of research. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that we must be conscious about the fact that we are engaging in an activity.
That is of course taken. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's right.
Thank you. By the way, it's like Indian Institute of Noetic Sciences is barely 35 miles north from where I'm located right now.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. So Dean Radin knows me very well, and he knows me very well.
Nice.
He is the director. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
सर, मुझे ये जो चैलेंजेस में 2-3 बातें करनी है। जैसे अभी मैं आत्मी यूनिवर्सिटी से हूँ, जहाँ से शीतल मैडम ने आपके साथ बात की थी। हम 2 लोग हैं यहाँ से ये वर्कशॉप कर रहे हैं।
जी, फिर से बताइए उस यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम।
आत्मी यूनिवर्सिटी, आत्मी यूनिवर्सिटी गुजरात।
ओके जी,
और सर यहाँ पे हमारे यहाँ पे एक्टिविटीज बहुत चलती है। ये IKS की फोरम भी है यहाँ पे, और जैसे लास्ट नवरात्रि में हमने यहाँ पे 7 डेज का लेक्चर सीरीज किया था भगवत गीता पे, और ये मैंने ही कंडक्ट किया था। तो मतलब कहीं पे भी धर्म का नाम लिए बिना भगवत गीता कैसे, मतलब हाउ टू बी हैप्पी, उसके हिसाब से। और अभी मेरा ऑब्जर्वेशन ये है कि फैकल्टीज भी समझ रहे हैं कि ये इम्पोर्टेंट है, स्टूडेंट्स को भी करना है, ऐसा नहीं है कि नहीं करना। लेकिन अभी हमने एजुकेशन को इतना वो कॉम्प्लिकेटेड कर दिया है, और एजुकेशन के साथ जैसे लेक्चर लैब का हमारा वो वर्क है, तो उसके साथ इतना सारा एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव वर्क, और मतलब अभी फैकल्टीज का इंटरेस्ट तो है, लेकिन उनको ये डर है कि अगर इसमें भी हम आ गए तो जो कर रहे हैं वो तो उसको करना ही है, ऊपर से ये भी करना है। स्टूडेंट्स को भी ऐसा ही है कि मार्क्स लाने हैं, तो अभी ये अलग से कैसे करें। तो विलिंगनेस तो है, अंदर से तो इच्छा है कि करनी है, लेकिन वो हम वो एनवायरनमेंट क्रिएट नहीं कर पा रहे हैं कि जिससे फैकल्टीज इसमें खुद आए। और दूसरी बात, फैकल्टी और स्टूडेंट्स दोनों को ये प्रश्न है कि फायदा क्या है, क्योंकि अभी हमने फायदा मतलब क्या, तो कि मनी के हिसाब से मिलेगा क्या, तुरंत यही क्वेश्चन है। वो ये नहीं जान पा रहे कि ये करेंगे तो जो मिल रहा है पैसे का वो भी अच्छे से मिलेगा, मतलब इफिशियंसी तो बढ़नी ही है इससे। लेकिन पहला क्वेश्चन यही है कि इससे करके क्या मिलेगा। तो ये पूरा का पूरा जो हमने एजुकेशन या फिर करियर या फिर टैलेंट सभी को एक पैसों से जोड़ दिया, तो इसका वो इम्पोर्टेंस नहीं मतलब कर पाए। जैसे योग है तो मतलब ये समझ आ रही है कि तुम योग मतलब हेल्थ अच्छी रखो तो जो करियर प्लेस है, वर्क प्लेस में, वहां पे भी अच्छे से इफिशिएंटली काम कर पाओगे, लेकिन वो नहीं दिखता योग में। या उसको मेडिटेशन में 1/2 घंटा नहीं देना, वो 1/2 घंटे का मेडिटेशन उसको पूरे दिन रिफ्रेश करेगा, लेकिन वो नहीं समझता। एक ये। और दूसरा सर, मैं देख पा रही हूँ बहुत दिनों से, जैसे आपने अभी लेक्चर में कहा था कि कोई पर्सन है कि इंग्लिश बोल रहा है और कुछ भी बोल रहा है वो हम नहीं देखते, बोल रहा है तो ठीक है, पर्सनालिटी अच्छी, या फिर उसकी वैल्यू हम वहीं से करते। और मैंने ये पूरी मेरी 20 इयर्स ये टीचिंग में दिए है, तो मेरा पूरा ये ऑब्जर्वेशन है कि इंग्लिश का इतना डोमिनेंस है कि मतलब स्टूडेंट्स, और हमारे यहाँ पे गुजराती मीडियम, हमारी मदर टंग गुजराती है, तो मैंने ये देखा है कि पूरा जो ओवरऑल पर्सनालिटी डेवलपमेंट है वो तो मदर टंग में ही हो रहा है। मेरे जो टॉप 10 स्टूडेंट्स होते हैं वो गुजराती मीडियम वाले ही होते हैं, लेकिन वो डरते बहुत है कहीं पे आगे जाने के लिए। जैसे उसको खड़ा करे कि कुछ बोलो चलो इस टॉपिक पे, तो वो गुजराती में बोलने से बहुत डरते। और जो इंग्लिश का बच्चा है बोल सकता है, कम्युनिकेट अच्छे से कर पाता है, वो कुछ भी कम्युनिकेट करे, लेकिन वो मतलब समझेंगे ऐसे। और मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि हमने ये जो मतलब ब्रिटिश तो चले गए, लेकिन उसका हम ये बाहर लेकर क्यों घूम रहे हैं इंग्लिश में। जैसे अभी इस वर्कशॉप में भी मैंने एक बार कहा था कि यहाँ पे आई थिंक 28-30 पार्टिसिपेंट्स है, मुझे नहीं लगता कोई ऐसा नहीं है जो हिंदी नहीं समझेगा। चलो मदर टंग हम प्रमोट नहीं कर पा रहे क्योंकि सभी की मदर टंग अलग अलग है, राइट, लेकिन हिंदी को तो प्रमोट कर ही सकते हैं क्योंकि सभी समझ ही रहे हैं हिंदी यहाँ पे, फिर भी हम नहीं छोड़ पा रहे इंग्लिश को, राइट। और अगर ऐसा है मैं हिंदुस्तान में रहती हूँ, हिंदी नहीं जानती, तो फिर मैं खुद में ही पहले कुछ काम करूँ कि मैं हिंदी तो एटलीस्ट कर लूँ पहले। कुछ लोग ऐसे भी है कि हिंदुस्तान में रहे लेकिन हिंदी नहीं समझ पा रहे, तो वो भी मतलब शुरुआत तो खुद से करनी है। और बहुत छोटा सा स्टेप है, बहुत छोटा सा। जैसे अभी हमारे यहाँ पे मीटिंग्स चलती है बोर्ड रूम में सभी हेड की, तो मुझे एवरी टाइम ऐसा लगता है कि मैं ऐसा बोलूं कि यहाँ पे जितने भी बोर्ड रूम में फैकल्टीज बैठे सभी गुजराती समझते हैं। चलो कोई नॉन गुजराती तो हिंदी तो समझते हैं, व्हाई वी आर यूजिंग इंग्लिश, व्हाई। और गुजराती में जो या मदर टंग में जो कम्युनिकेशन है इतना कंफर्टेबली हो रहा है सर, तो फिर हम क्यों ये इंग्लिश को नहीं छोड़ पा रहे। और हम नहीं छोड़ पा रहे इसलिए बच्चे भी नहीं छोड़ पा रहे। जैसे मैं क्लासरूम में जाती हूँ और इंग्लिश बोलती हूँ तो बच्चों को ऐसा लगता है कि मुझे भी बोलना है। तो बहुत छोटी सी शुरुआत है, लेकिन कहीं से करे तो मतलब ऐसा लगे कि कॉन्फिडेंस आए खुद में कि नहीं ये हो सकता है, इंग्लिश के बिना चल सकता।
मुझे ये लगता है कि
सभी स्टेट्स में जितनी भी जगह जैसे कोई गवर्नमेंट ऑफिसेस है, वहीं पे जो कोई भी मतलब कम्युनिकेशन होता है वो तीनों लैंग्वेज में होता है, मदर टंग हमारी राष्ट्रभाषा और इंग्लिश तीनों में होता है। जैसे कोई बैंक में अकाउंट खुलवाना है और फॉर्म भरना है, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि वहां पे मतलब इंग्लिश के बिना नहीं चलता, सभी जगह पे चलता है। लेकिन ये हम आपने कहा ना कि वो इनकॉन्शियसली हम हमारे पर इतना सारा वो डोमिनेंस हो गया है। जैसे मैं ये क्लास में प्रूव कर दूं एज अ टीचर कि मैं इंग्लिश नहीं बोलती, मैं चलो कोई गुजराती का बच्चा गुजराती नहीं समझ रहा है, मैं हिंदी बोलती हूँ लेकिन बहुत अच्छे से बच्चों को पढ़ा रही हूँ, तो मेरा कॉन्फिडेंस देख के स्टूडेंट्स भी ये समझ पाए। तो शुरुआत तो हमें खुद से ही बहुत छोटी जगह से करनी होगी, लेकिन हम नहीं कर पा रहे।
बहुत 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 जरूरी है। मुझे ये लगता है कि हम लोगों को शुरुआत इसकी जो है वो द्विभाषी होना पड़ेगा। एजुकेशन जो ये जो श्री अरबिंदो ने काफी काम किया था एजुकेशन के ऊपर, तो उनकी कुछ राइटिंग्स इस विषय में हैं। तो उनका ये मानना है कि पहले मतलब 5वें क्लास तक जो शिक्षा है वो शिक्षा मातृभाषा में होनी चाहिए, मातृभाषा में वो शिक्षा होनी चाहिए। उसके बाद ही अगर दूसरी भाषा अगर लाना है तो उसको लाया जा सकता है। अब जैसे मैं पुराने समय की बात कर रहा हूँ, मैं अपने पिताजी की बात बता रहा हूँ। मेरे पिताजी ने तो अंग्रेजी सीखना 8वीं कक्षा में शुरू किया था, लेकिन मैं सिर्फ अंग्रेजी की बात करूंगा, उनकी अंग्रेजी बड़ी अच्छी थी। तो मुझे ये लगता है कि ये हम लोगों को पूरे भारत में, और पूरे भारत में तो खैर हिंदी के बारे में नहीं कर सकते हैं, लेकिन मातृभाषा के ऊपर ये करना और ये जोर डालना बच्चों में शुरुआती तौर पे कम से कम, कि दोनों में एक समान रूप से कॉम्पिटेंस होना, ये बहुत जरूरी है। देखिए, अंग्रेजी को अगर हम सिर्फ एक माध्यम लें कि ठीक है अभी की दुनिया में जो है वो अंग्रेजी बोली जा रही है, आप विदेश में आप वार्ता कर सकते हैं अगर आप अंग्रेजी जानते हैं। अगर अंग्रेजी को हम एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करते हैं, जिस तरह से हम टेक्नोलॉजी के साथ भी है, टेक्नोलॉजी या तो हमारे ऊपर हावी हो सकता है या फिर हम टेक्नोलॉजी को इस्तेमाल करें। अब ये इंटरनेट ही है, अब मैं अपने आप को डिस्ट्रैक्ट करके इंटरनेट में जो है वो तमाम लगा रह सकता हूँ, या फिर मैं इंटरनेट का इस्तेमाल करके अमेरिका से बैठ करके आप भारत के और दुनिया के विभिन्न भाग में ये जो वार्ता हो रही है ये कर सकता हूँ। तो जब तक हम इसको अगर एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करते हैं तो हम इसके क्लच में नहीं आते हैं, इसके दबाव में नहीं आते हैं, इसके आलिंगन में नहीं आते। लेकिन जब जिस तरह से टेक्नोलॉजी हमको वश कर लेता है, उसी तरह से अगर भाषा अगर हमको वश कर तो फिर गड़बड़ है। क्योंकि और ये चीज जो है ये बिकमिंग इंडियन में पवन वर्मा ने, उन्होंने बड़ी अच्छी बात कही। उन्होंने कहा कि हमारा जो भाव है, जो हमारी भाव की दुनिया है, हमारी भाव की दुनिया मातृभाषा में ही। जब हम अपने भाव को व्यक्त, मैं आपको जैसे बताता हूँ, मैं इनफैक्ट मैं कुछ 5-6 महीने एक यूनिवर्सिटी में गया था, गुजरात में ही, सूरत में। तो मैं वहाँ फैकल्टी डेवलपमेंट वर्कशॉप्स करा रहा था। तो वो वर्कशॉप्स लंबे चलते थे, आज 3.5 घंटे का है। तो वहाँ भी जो है वो कहानी 9 बजे शुरू होती थी और 3 बजे के आसपास खत्म होना होता था। लेकिन हमारे कॉन्वर्सेशन ऐसे होते थे, हमारी वार्ताएं ऐसी होती थी, वो लंबा चलता था। 3 बजे के बाद 4, 4:30, 5 बजे तक वो चलता रहता था। तो उसी वार्ता में कभी कभी जो है उनको कहानियां सुनाते थे। तो जब कहानी की बारी आती थी तो मुझे अंग्रेजी भाषा का प्रयोग करना बिल्कुल अच्छा नहीं लगता था, क्योंकि उसमें लगता था कि जो हमारी दुनिया है, जो मेरे भाव की दुनिया है, जो मेरा भावनात्मक जुड़ाव है, वो बाहर आ ही नहीं पाएगा, वो उसका बाह्यकरण नहीं होगा। और सबसे बड़ी विडंबना ये है कि ये भाषा इतनी समृद्ध है। मैं सिर्फ हिंदी के बारे में नहीं कह रहा हूँ, हमारी सारी भाषाएं बहुत समृद्ध हैं, और उनको छोड़ देना, उनका त्याग कर देना, उनका परित्याग कर देना, ये अच्छी बात नहीं है मेरे ख्याल से। तो मेरा ये मानना है कि हमको भाषा को एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए कम्युनिकेशन, हमको उसके वश में नहीं आ जाना चाहिए। तो मैं आपकी बात से बिल्कुल सहमत हूँ, और मुझे लगता है कि चूंकि हम लोगों को कॉलोनियल प्रोसेस में पूरे कंट्री को, पूरे समाज को इतना गरीब भी बना दिया गया कि हम लोगों को शायद अंग्रेजी का अच्छा ज्ञान होना अपने सिविलाइजेशन को वापस उसको रिप्लेनिश करने में बहुत मदद करेगा। तो हमको इसको एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल कर लेना चाहिए, और वहीं पर उस बात को छोड़ देनी चाहिए।
और अभी क्या है सर, 12th स्टैंडर्ड
सकती हूँ क्या सर?
हाँ सर,
जी भूमिका जी से मैं बात कर लूं, या फिर आप ऐड वो
सर मुझे 2 बातें करनी है सर।
जी
2 बातें सर।
सर
अभी 12th,
लक्ष्मी जी आपके पास। जी
सर 12th तक अभी हम क्या 3 लैंग्वेज तो दे ही रहे हैं, फर्स्ट मदर टंग, सेकंड लैंग्वेज हिंदी और थर्ड इंग्लिश। ऐसे 12th तक जैसे मैंने ही मेरे मदर टंग में ही मेरा एजुकेशन है, फिर भी अभी इतना सारा मतलब करके ऐसा नहीं लगता कि इंग्लिश में कोई वीकनेस है, इतना तो हम कर ही लेते। लेकिन अभी क्या है कि हमने फर्स्ट लैंग्वेज, सर यहाँ पे सीबीएसई बोर्ड की स्कूल में फर्स्ट लैंग्वेज वो है इंग्लिश, सेकंड लैंग्वेज हिंदी और थर्ड लैंग्वेज मदर टंग। जो 12th का जो बच्चा होता है वो सिर्फ 2 स्टैंडर्ड मतलब सेकेंड स्टैंडर्ड तक का ही गुजराती जानता है, सेकेंड स्टैंडर्ड तक सीबीएसई स्कूल से। तो मतलब मदर टंग में इतना वीक है वो कि वो कभी अपना मतलब भारतीय होने का वो ले ही नहीं सकता, वो प्राउड ही नहीं ले सकता कभी। और ये ठीक है, इंग्लिश को एज ए टूल तो यूज कर ही सकते हैं, लेकिन अभी उस इंग्लिश के हिसाब से ही हम अगर मतलब जज करना चालू कर दे तो वो मुझे
ये बहुत बड़ी दिक्कत है। ये बहुत बड़ी दिक्कत है, क्योंकि हमको ये देखना चाहिए कि सिर्फ ये भाषा है, इससे किसी भी मनुष्य का जो है उसको उसकी मानसिक तीव्रता का परिचय नहीं होता है।
और सर ये साइंटिफिकली प्रूवन है कि मैंने ये मतलब मदर टंग की एक बुक पढ़ी थी कि जैसे मेरा जो ब्रेन है, जैसे बेबी अपनी माँ के गर्भ में होता है तभी से मदर टंग सीखना चालू कर देता है। तो साइंटिफिकली ये प्रूव हुआ है कि जब भी मेरे माइंड में सपोज गुजराती मेरी मदर टंग है तो इंग्लिश का कोई वर्ड आप बोले सेंटेंस और मेरे माइंड तक पहुंचता है तो मेरा माइंड पहले उसे मदर टंग में ही कन्वर्ट करता है, फिर उसका आंसर भी मुझे मदर टंग में ही मिलता है, फिर ब्रेन उसको फिर से कन्वर्ट करता है इंग्लिश में। तो जो इंग्लिश और आपने इंग्लिश में बोला और मुझ तक पहुंचा तो उसमें 4 स्टेप्स होंगे, और अगर वही मुझे गुजराती में ही मिलता तो वो 2 स्टेप में खत्म हो जाता कन्वर्सेशन। तो मेरी इफिशियंसी 50% कम हो जाती है जब मैं मदर टंग के अलावा और कोई लैंग्वेज यूज करती हूँ, तो 50% कैपेसिटी कम हो जाती है। ये साइंटिफिकली प्रूव भी हो गया। थैंक यू सर।
जी, मैं विज्ञान का बहुत बड़ा प्रशंसक नहीं हूँ। मैं विज्ञान को जो है उसका क्रिटिकल एग्जामिन करता हूँ तो इसीलिए मतलब साइंटिफिकली प्रूवन होना जो है वो मेरे लिए उस नॉलेज का स्टैंप नहीं है। जस्ट मतलब एक उसको हास्यास्पद शब्दों में अगर मैं कह सकूं। हाँ लक्ष्मी जी, आप ये कह रहे हैं, सॉरी आप उनका जी की बात खत्म हो गई जी, या प्लीज।
यस, थैंक यू सर। एक्चुअली सर अभी मैं पुणे से हूँ, इंजीनियरिंग कॉलेज से, कंप्यूटर डिपार्टमेंट, मींस मैं आईटी फील्ड में बिलोंग करती हूँ। तो हमारे यहाँ क्या है, अभी सेकेंड ईयर में ह्यूमैनिटी एंड सोशल साइंस एक सब्जेक्ट है जिसमें कोई लैंग्वेज कंपल्शन नहीं है। मतलब बच्चों को जो भी हाउ टू बिहेव विद सोसाइटी, हमें क्या ऐसे करना है, हमारे वैल्यूज क्या है, ये सब पढ़ाना है। तो उसमें लैंग्वेज कंपल्शन कुछ नहीं है। मतलब आप कौन सी भी लैंग्वेज यूज कर सकते हो, मराठी, अगर महाराष्ट्र से मराठी या फिर हिंदी या फिर इंग्लिश। तो यूनिवर्सिटी ने यही दिया है कि बच्चों को सिर्फ समझ में आना चाहिए कि सोसाइटी में हमें कैसे बिहेव करना है। लैंग्वेज कंपल्शन नहीं है फॉर द सेकेंड ईयर स्टूडेंट। बट जब वो बच्चे थर्ड ईयर में जाते हैं, फाइनल ईयर में जाते हैं, तो कैंपस प्लेसमेंट होती है, क्योंकि आफ्टर ऑल अगर वो इंजीनियरिंग से है तो उन्हें आईटी कंपनी में जॉब मिलनी चाहिए। और यहाँ पे जो भी नंबर ऑफ आईटी कंपनीज है वो एमएनसी है। तो वहां पे क्या है कि एमएनसी है, मतलब आउट ऑफ इंडिया जो भी कंट्रीज है, अमेरिका, यूएसए, नंबर ऑफ कंट्रीज है। सो उनके साथ अगर कम्युनिकेट करना है, क्योंकि क्लाइंट वहां से है या फिर कंपनी वहां से बिलोंग करती है, तो जो एट द टाइम ऑफ इंटरव्यू क्या है कि उन्हें इंग्लिश आना ही चाहिए। और अगर बच्चा इंजीनियरिंग में आता है तो हर एक का माइंडसेट क्या है कि अगर उसे इंग्लिश आता है तो ही वो कैंपस प्लेसमेंट, उसकी कैंपस में प्लेसमेंट हो सकती है, अदरवाइज ही इज नॉट एबल टू क्रैक इंटरव्यू। तो यहाँ पे इंग्लिश कंपलसरी हो जाती है आफ्टर थर्ड एंड फोर्थ ईयर, कि अगर आपको कैंपस प्लेसमेंट चाहिए, इसका मतलब अच्छा पैकेज होगा, एमएनसी में जाओगी तो अच्छा पैकेज मिलेगा, और वो ट्रैक करने के लिए आपको इंग्लिश आना ही चाहिए। उसमें ग्रुप कम्युनिकेशन होगा, कम्युनिकेशन स्किल होगा, सॉफ्ट स्किल होगा, तो वो सब के लिए इंग्लिश कंपलसरी आना ही चाहिए। तो इसमें अगर हम कोई बच्चा हिंदी या फिर मदर टंग मराठी है यूज करते हैं तो नहीं, वो तो नहीं हो सकता। क्यों? उसे नॉलेज है, उसके पास बहुत टेक्निकल नॉलेज है, वो डेवलप कर सकता है, टेस्ट कर सकता है, हर कुछ कर सकता है। बट ड्यू टू कम्युनिकेशन, क्योंकि उसे इंग्लिश में इतना कॉन्फिडेंटली वो बोल नहीं सकता, उसके लिए, उसकी वजह से उसकी प्लेसमेंट नहीं होती है। ये हर एक के बच्चे में डर है, हर स्टूडेंट के मन में ये डर है, ये साइकोलॉजी है। अगर इंग्लिश आएगी तभी वो प्लेस होता, इवन दो उसमें टेक्निकल स्किल नहीं होता फिर भी वो प्लेस होता, बट अगर इंग्लिश
तो
नहीं आती है
उसमें वही करना ये होता है कि जो बायलिंगुअल कॉलोनियलिज्म की जो बात हो रही थी, देखिए मैं जो ये कह रहा हूँ कि जब तक हम इसको एक टूल की तरह इसका इस्तेमाल कर रहे हैं तब तक कोई परेशानी नहीं है, तब तक कोई परेशानी नहीं है। अब देखिए, अब जब ये वर्कशॉप कंडक्ट करने के लिए आया तो मुझे ये मालूम नहीं है, ये मैं नहीं जान, भारत में बहुत सारी भाषाएं हैं, तो उसमें मतलब उसको मैं अंग्रेजी को एक माध्यम की तरह इस्तेमाल कर रहा हूँ, मैंने किया। अब यहाँ पर यह है कि मान लीजिए कि जिनकी भाषा हिंदी नहीं है या फिर हमसे अंग्रेजी में बात करना चाहते हैं तो मैं उनसे अंग्रेजी में बात करूंगा, लेकिन अगर हिंदी में अगर बात करना चाहते हैं तो मैं हिंदी में बात करूंगा।
okay.
और मुझे अपनी भाषा के प्रति कोई शर्म नहीं है या कोई इस तरह का ये नहीं है, मतलब मुझे कोई हीन भावना नहीं है इसके प्रति। ये मेरी भाषा है और मैं उस भाषा को बिल्कुल एम्ब्रेस करता हूँ। तो कहने का मतलब ये है कि उसको अगर हम एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल कर लें तो हम अपने आप को बाकी दुनिया के साथ उनके साथ नेगोशिएट भी कर लेंगे, उनके साथ विल हैव अ कॉन्वर्सेशन, और हम जो है अपनी भाषा से भी जुड़े रहेंगे और अपनी संस्कृति से भी जुड़े रहेंगे।
सर और एक
तो
डाउट है मुझे,
ये दोनों मतलब मेरे हिसाब से ईदर और नहीं होना चाहिए।
okay.
हमारी कुछ सोशल कंटिजेंसी हैं जिसके कारण हमें अंग्रेजी सीखनी है। हम समझ सकते हैं कि सीखने से जो है लोगों को फायदा होता है, लोग बढ़ते हैं, सारी बात ये है। लेकिन अंग्रेजी माध्यम से हमारा पूरा डेफिनेशन हो जाए, हम अपने आप को डिफाइन कर, हम अपने आप को परिभाषित करने लगे, वो परेशानी का कारण है।
okay.
जो हमारी आइडेंटिटी जब डिफाइन होने लगती है उससे परेशानी है, क्योंकि वो एक हीन भावना से हमको ग्रसित करता है, और ये हीन भावना जो है अंदर में वैक्यूम क्रिएट करता है, और ये वैक्यूम जो है ना वो अनक्रिटिकली सारा वेस्टर्न जो है उसको सक करना शुरू करता है, और हम जितना उसको सक करते हैं हम उतना अपने नॉलेज सिस्टम से हम दूर होते जाते हैं। और जैसा आप लोगों ने देखा होगा इस पूरे वर्कशॉप में और डिफरेंट लोगों के प्रेजेंटेशन से कि हमारे यहाँ सीखने की बहुत चीजें हैं। वेस्टर्नर्स जो हैं वो लंबे समय से निरंतर हमसे सीख रहे हैं, और अभी किन्हीं ने ये बताया था, डॉक्टर प्रधान ने बताया था, जो बता रहे थे कि डाइजेशन का प्रॉब्लम, वो डाइजेशन का प्रॉब्लम बहुत मेजर है। तो जिस संस्कृति को हम पढ़ना नहीं चाहते हैं, हम उनको समझना नहीं चाहते हैं, हम उनको यूज नहीं करना चाहते हैं, वेस्टर्नर्स जो है वो उन्होंने तमाम उसका यूज किया है। इनफैक्ट अगर आप यूट्यूब पे जाइएगा और अगर मेरे नाम से अगर आप सर्च करेंगे तो बहुत सारे आपको वीडियोस मिलेंगे। उसमें एक वीडियो ये भी है कि इंडियन साइकोलॉजी इज एज लेजिटिमेट एज वेस्टर्न साइकोलॉजी, देयर इज वन वीडियो बाय दैट नेम। उसमें मैं ये बता रहा हूँ कि पूरा साइकोलॉजी एज अ डिसिप्लिन, इसका जो ग्रोथ हुआ है, इसका पूरा ग्रोथ इंडियन इन्फ्लुएंसेस से हुआ है। ये डॉक्यूमेंट, मतलब इसको हमने डॉक्यूमेंट करने की कोशिश की है उस ब्रीफ प्रेजेंटेशन में, एविडेंस दे रहा हूँ। तो हमारी संस्कृति और हमारा नॉलेज सिस्टम जो है उसका ये इम्पैक्ट है, तो उसको पूरा समझना बहुत जरूरी है मेरे हिसाब से। मैं ये कह रहा हूँ, और मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि अगर दोनों भाषा को अगर हम सीखते हैं तो इससे तो हम एनरिच ही होते हैं, हम तो समृद्धि होते हैं। और जबकि हमारी भाषा, हम सारी भाषाएं बहुत सुंदर हैं, बहुत सुंदर और समृद्ध है।
सर वन मोर डाउट मीन्स आई डोंट नो कि ये सही है, मेरा ऐसा सोचना सही है या नहीं है, बट जैसे कि हमारे पूरे वर्ल्ड में अगर एक दूसरे के साथ कम्युनिकेट करना है तो हमें इंग्लिश भाषा है। जैसे कि भारत में मदर टंग अलग अलग है, हर एक स्टेट की मदर टंग अलग है, बट फिर भी कम्युनिकेशन पर्पस के लिए हिंदी है। वैसे ही पूरे वर्ल्ड में कम्युनिकेशन पर्पज के लिए इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज है, जो कि हर एक देश की लैंग्वेज अलग अलग है। बट फिर भी देखो, अगर कोई फॉरेनर्स हमारे इंडिया में, भारत में आते हैं, ठीक है, तो सब टोटल, अरे वो तो फॉरेनर है, वो इंग्लिश में बात करते हैं, तो हमें उनके साथ कम्युनिकेट करने के लिए हमें इंग्लिश आनी चाहिए। या फिर कोई भी शॉपकीपर रहते हैं, या फिर कोई भी मतलब टांगे वाला हो, बस वाला हो, रिक्शा वाला हो, कोई भी हो, उसे तो इंग्लिश नहीं, सबको इंग्लिश नहीं आती है। वो ऐसे पैसे तो ढूंढती है कि जिसे इंग्लिश आती हो, ताकि वो उनके साथ कम्युनिकेट करे। मीन्स सब क्या ट्राई करते हैं कि अगर वो फॉरेनर है, उनके साथ कम्युनिकेट करना है तो इंग्लिश आनी ही चाहिए। वैसे अगर हम भारतवासी अगर फॉरेन कंट्रीज में जाते हैं, तो फिर भी वहाँ की लैंग्वेज इंग्लिश है, तो वहां पे भी वैसे ही होता है ना कि हमें इंग्लिश आनी चाहिए, उन्हें नहीं आनी चाहिए। हमारी भाषा हिंदी है, उनकी इंग्लिश है, फिर भी उन्हें हमें इंग्लिश आनी चाहिए। उनकी जो, उनके साथ हम अडेप्ट कर लेंगे, और वो हमारे देश में आती है, हमारी लैंग्वेज हिंदी है, तो वो नहीं वो उनका साइड ही नहीं है कि वहां पे जाते हैं।
उसका कारण है ना, उसका कारण ये है कि वेल्थ का डिस्पैरिटी है। देखिए, मान लीजिए कि अगर हम समृद्ध देश होते, ठीक है, अगर हमारे देश में गरीबी अगर नहीं होती, और मैं जिस गरीबी की बात कर रहा हूँ, मैं सड़क पे गरीबी, ऐसा नहीं है कि यूएस में जो है वो गरीबी नहीं है, यूएस में गरीबी है, लेकिन वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में गरीबी नहीं दिखती है। तो मैं वही कह रहा हूँ कि चूंकि हमारे यहाँ जो है इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में वो गरीबी दिखती है, तो कहने का मतलब है कि हमारा पॉलिटिकल और सोशल नीड है ये। तो उस नीड को नजर में रखते हुए मैं फिर से वही कहूंगा कि हमें इसका एक टूल की तरह इस्तेमाल करना चाहिए। जो सो कॉल्ड फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड के लोग आते हैं, उनको इसकी आवश्यकता नहीं है। वो जानते हैं कि हम अंग्रेजी सीखेंगे और इंटरेक्ट करने के लिए वो नहीं करेंगे, उनकी आवश्यकता नहीं है। हमारी आवश्यकता हमारे कॉलोनियल पीरियड के कारण है, इसीलिए हमको इसमें एंगेज करना है, लेकिन हमको इसमें एक बुद्धिमत्ता के साथ एंगेज करना है, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ। और साथ में मैं ये भी कह रहा हूँ कि जो सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम ये है कि ये जो हम एक सांस्कृतिक दृष्टिकोण में या एक सांस्कृतिक लेवल पे जो हीनता हमारे अंदर घुस गई है, इस हीनता को हटाना बहुत जरूरी है। अगर आप हीनता से आप परे हो गए, आप क्या कहते हैं, उससे अगर आप निकल गए, तो फिर आप कोई भी लैंग्वेज यूज कीजिए ना, कोई भाषा यूज कीजिए, क्या फर्क पड़ता है? कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता है। तो लक्ष्मी जी, मैं आगे बढ़ूं और should I move to other people also now?
Yes, thank you sir.
धन्यवाद। तो पंकज जी, मैं आपके पास थोड़ी देर में आऊंगा, आपसे बात हो चुकी है। मैं सुमन जी से बात करता हूँ, उसके बाद then I'll come to you.
कुंदन सर नमस्कार। और आपका जो मैंने ये अभी पूरा स्पीच सुना, इसमें सबसे इंटरेस्टिंग बात ये थी कि आपने इतनी बहादुरी के साथ कहा कि हम इंडियन भाषा को लेकर सेम और गिल्ट महसूस करते हैं, और अभी सब लोग भाषा बात करें, हम लोग हर अपने कल्चर में भी अपने आप को सेम और गिल्ट महसूस करते हैं। जैसे अभी आपने कहा उंगली से खाना खाने में, अपने हाथों से हाथ खाना खाने में, इवन की कुर्ता पैजामा पहनने में, इवन की जमीन में नीचे बैठ के खाना खाने में, हमने अपने पूरे संस्कृति के हर पार्ट में, अपने डांस में, अपने म्यूजिक में, हर एक में हम अपने आप को हीन भावना से ग्रसित महसूस करते हैं। हमें हर लेवल पे काम करने की जरूरत है। हम जहां बैठते हैं, हमने साड़ी भी पहनी, इंडिया में भी एक होटल में एंट्री मना कर दी गई कि साड़ी पहन के अलाउ ही नहीं है, हालांकि वो होटल बंद हो गया, रिस्ट्रिक्शन हो गया। बट आप सोचिए, हमारे हर जो चीजें महत्वपूर्ण है, बहुत चीजें अगर हम साइंटिफिक देखें जो पहले से डिसाइड की गई है, हर एक, चाहे हमारे पेड़ों की पूजा हो, चाहे पत्थरों की पूजा हो, चाहे साड़ी पहनना हो, चाहे दीपावली में दिया जलाना हो, चाहे होली में होलिका दहन करना हो, हर एक का साइंटिफिक रीजन है। हम हीन भावना से ग्रसित इसलिए होते हैं क्योंकि हमें नॉलेज नहीं है, हम अपनी नॉलेज को इम्प्रूव ही नहीं करते। और अंग्रेजी को, जो कि आपने बार बार कहा कि ये माध्यम है, ओनली टूल, नॉलेज नहीं है। हम जज करने में गलती करते हैं कि हम मीडियम से लोगों को जज कर रहे हैं। तो हम सबसे पहले हमें अपने आप को एक्सप्लोर करने की जरूरत है। हम जब अपने आप को एक्सप्लोर कर लेंगे कि नॉलेज इंग्लिश से नहीं पता लगती है, नॉलेज से पता लगती है, दैट इज ओनली मीडियम। वो चाहे मदर टंग में हो या फिर नेशनल जो भी राष्ट्रभाषा है उसमें हो, तो कहीं ना कहीं कमी हम में है। हम अपने आप का रिस्पेक्ट नहीं दे पा रहे, ना अपने कपड़ों का, इवन कि सर हमारे कॉलेज में डिसाइड हो रहा था यूनिफॉर्म के लिए, तो शर्ट पैंट और टाई, तो मैंने कहा एक ऑप्शन ये हफ्ते में एक दिन कुर्ता पजामा का भी रख देना चाहिए। आप सोचिए सब मुझे ऐसे देख रहे थे जैसे मैंने बिल्कुल बैकवर्ड, मैं दुनिया की सबसे बैकवर्ड लेडी जो, मैंने ये कह कैसे दिया कि कुर्ता पजामा और शॉल। मैंने कहा, फिर बोले कि ये कौन पहनता है आजकल, ये कहाँ की ड्रेस है। तो मैंने कहा अनिल सर भी पहनते हैं, AICT के जो चेयरमैन सर हैं, सारे नेता भी पहनते, सब बेवकूफ हैं, सब बुद्धू हैं। तो आप सोचिए, मतलब आज भी कुर्ता पजामा से इंटेलिजेंट होने का पता लगता है। आप पढ़े लिखे नहीं है, आप साइंटिस्ट नहीं है, आप इंजीनियरिंग के टीचर नहीं है, अगर आपके टाई और शर्ट पैंट नहीं लगा होगा, तो ये कमी हम में है। तो
नहीं, मैं यार यही कह रहा हूँ, देखिए सुमन जी, मैं ये कह रहा था कि कॉलोनियल प्रोसेस ही ऐसा होता है, ये ऑल परवेजिव फिनोमेना है, ये सब जगह। ये देखिए क्या कहते हैं, ये हम कॉलोनाइजेशन का जो इफेक्ट है कि आपको वो हमें भी दिखता है कि जब थॉट्स को एक्सप्रेस करना होता है तो अंग्रेजी का सहारा लेना पड़ता है, क्योंकि कट गए, क्योंकि हमको कॉन्सेप्ट जो है वो, देखिए वो कैसी डायकॉटमी क्रिएट हुई है कि भाव जब आता है तो भाव आज भी जो है अपनी भाषा में आता है, थॉट्स जब आते हैं तो वो वहां अंग्रेजियत समझ चालू हो जाती है। उसका कारण ये हुआ है क्योंकि पूरा अध्ययन जो है वो अध्ययन ही तो उसी मीडियम में हो गया। तो जो मैं आपको ये कह रहा था कि ये ऑल परवेसिव फिनोमेना है। कॉलोनाइजेशन जो है वो कॉलोनाइज्ड में वो हीन भावना करता ही करता है। तो इसमें हम लोगों को बिरेट नहीं करना चाहिए अपने आप को। हमको क्या कहते हैं, हमको ये नहीं करना चाहिए कि मतलब हम में कोई कमी, ये कमी है हमारे जो भी कारण हुआ, हम कॉलोनाइज्ड हो गए और उसके कॉन्सिक्वेंस के कारण ये हुआ। और अगर उसको हम कॉज इफेक्ट में अगर हम इस तरह से देखेंगे तो इसके ऊपर काम करना बहुत ही सहज हो जाएगा। क्योंकि देखिए, अगर आप क्या कहते हैं, अगर अपने आप को हीन मान करके जब आप अपने ऊपर काम करते हैं तो काम करना मुश्किल होता है। इट इज डिफिकल्ट टू वर्क ऑन oneself इन दैट सिचुएशन। लेकिन अगर आप कहेंगे हाँ मतलब ऐसा हुआ है, ऐसा ये हमारी डेस्टिनी थी, हमारे डेस्टिनी का पार्ट हुआ है और इसका कॉज इफेक्ट ऐसा है, ये दुनिया में हर एक कॉलोनाइज्ड वर्ग में इस तरह की चीजें हुई हैं, हम में भी आ गई हैं और हमको इससे निकलना है। एक सांस्कृतिक तौर पे निकलना है, एक राष्ट्रीय तौर पे निकलना है। हम निकलें कैसे, हमको ये सोचना है। और वही जो हमारी जो आज बात हो रही है, जो एक इम्पोर्टेंट बात है, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि देखिए, अगर हम इस हीन भावना से अगर हम सांस्कृतिक तरीके से अगर हम निकल जाएंगे तो हम अपनी सारी नॉलेज सिस्टम पढ़ भी लेंगे, क्योंकि उसके बाद उसमें पढ़ने की चाहत होगी ना, चाह होगा। हमको ये लगेगा अच्छा हमारे जो पूर्वज थे, हमारे ये पूर्वज बहुत विद्वान थे, उनसे हमें सीखना है कि वो क्या कह रहे हैं। तो जब इस तरह की आकांक्षा जब जागृत होगी तो हम फिर क्या करते हैं, हम पढ़ने के लिए जाएंगे, हम जानने के लिए जाएंगे। तो उसके बाद जो है ये इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम जो है वो फिर वो एक ये इट वोंट बी अ चोर, मतलब एक ये नहीं होगा कि मुझे करना है, वो सहज हो जाएगा। हम सहज उसके साथ जो है हमारा उसके साथ जुड़ाव हो जाएगा। मैं ये कह रहा था।
बिल्कुल सही सर। और बहुत कुछ हम इंडियन में, एक अच्छी बात है जो एक कहा गया है कि हमारी हस्ती कुछ ऐसी है जो मिटती नहीं। तो अगर आप देखिए अभी भी हमारे ट्रेडिशन चले आ रहे हैं, इवन की चैंटिंग अभी भी मंत्रों की होती है, अभी भी हवन पूजन, भूमि पूजन
बहुत वीक हो गया है, लेकिन देखिए बहुत वीक हो गया है।
प्रेजेंट तो है अभी भी हमारे में, समाप्त नहीं हुआ। ये भी एक बहुत बड़ी बात है। इतने बड़े इतने साल हम लोगों ने बाहरी आक्रमणों को सहा और उसके बाद भी हमारे बीच आज प्रेजेंट है। और इवन की आज की जनरेशन नहीं, लेकिन हमारी जनरेशन के लोगों को तो सभी को सारे मंत्र और ये सभी चीजें पता है कि भूमि पूजन होता है और ये होता है। अभी ये इंग्लिश मीडियम के कारण थोड़ा सा गायब हुआ है, बट फिर भी ये भी बहुत बड़ी बात है।
सुमन जी, मुझे ये बताइए, मैं आपसे एक सवाल करना चाहता हूँ।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
कि इस जनरेशन की उम्र में जब आप थी तो ये क्यूरियोसिटी थी?
नो।
देखिए, यही गड़बड़ हो जाता है, ये हम लोग सब लोगों में हो जाता है, क्योंकि कॉलोनाइजेशन का ये भी कॉन्सिक्वेंस। अब मान लीजिए कि जो हमारा योग का और जो हमारा स्पिरिचुअलिटी का रिजर्वायर जो कि एक प्रोफाउंड पावर देता है हर एक तरह का, इंक्लूडिंग इंटेलेक्चुअल, मानसिक भी, अगर उससे संपर्क हमारा, उससे संसर्ग हमारा शुरुआती दिनों में नहीं होता है और हम बाद में जाकर के हम उससे संपर्क करते हैं, तो जिस समय में हम उसको यूज करके वर्ल्ड बीटर्स हो सकते थे, वो तो हमने नहीं किया। तो मेरे कहने का मतलब है कि हम आज भी सर्वाइवल मोड में हैं। हमको इस सर्वाइवल मोड से कैसे निकलना है? हाउ डू वी बिकम विनर्स फ्रॉम बीइंग सर्वाइवर्स? हमारा सिविलाइजेशन और हमारी संस्कृति जो है वो सर्वाइव कर गई, बिल्कुल सही बात है। अब उसको जो है उसको ये करना है, इट हैज टू बी मैनिफेस्टेड इन अ बिग वे। उसको प्रफुल्लित करना है,
ऊंचाई तक ले जाना है, रिस्पेक्टेड वे,
उसको ऊंचाई तक लेके जाना है, उसको ऊंचाई तक ले जाना है। और मेरे ख्याल से मैं जो बार बार जो आज जो इम्पोर्टेंट पार्ट है कॉन्वर्सेशन का, वो ये है कि अगर हम उस हीन भावना से निकल जाएंगे तो हम सब कर लेंगे। हम क्या कहते हैं, हम अंग्रेजी भी पढ़ लेंगे, हम वेस्टर्न सिस्टम भी पढ़ लेंगे, और साथ साथ जो है अपना सिस्टम भी पढ़ लेंगे। और हम अपने सिस्टम को जब हमको क्या कहते हैं उसकी सुपीरियरिटी बतानी होगी, जो कि है हमारा जो एपिस्टेमोलॉजी है, वो हमारा एपिस्टेमोलॉजी बहुत रिच है। इसीलिए तो मैं कह रहा हूँ, मेरे पेपर्स में तो बहुत क्लियरली आया है कि जहाँ आपकी कहानी खत्म हो जाती है, हमारी वहां से कहानी शुरू होती है।
जी,
वहां से हमारी कहानी शुरू होती है।
सभी सुख के लिए परेशान है। हमारी जो लिटरेचर है वो सुख के ही बात करता है, और तो बात ही नहीं करता।
और मैं 28 साल की उम्र में लिख रहा था,
गुड,
और लिख रहा था और वेस्टर्नर्स को बोल रहा था मैं कि आप जहाँ क्या कहते हैं, आप जहाँ खत्म होते हैं, हम वहां से शुरू होते हैं। तो ये पावर है इसका। लेकिन फिर भी मैं कहूंगा कि इस कंटेम्प्रेरी, और देखिए भारतीय जो हमारा अल्टीमेट क्या है, ये विश्व तो हमें निहित है, विश्व अंदर है। तो एक समय में जाकर के इंडियन वेस्टर्न की डायकोटमी जो है वो भी डिसॉल्व कर जानी पड़ेगी।
बिल्कुल,
सब तो हमारे अंदर ही है ना।
हाँ, सब
तो हमारे ही अंदर है। तो अगर हमारे अंदर है, तो हम उस सिस्टम को अच्छी तरह से क्यों नहीं पढ़ें? तो मेरा ये मानना है कि उस सिस्टम के ऊपर भी हमारा उतना ही आधिपत्य होना चाहिए जितना कि हमारा अपनी इसके प्रति है। वो मैं फिर से कहूंगा कि वो एक एम्पावरमेंट देता है, This is the kind of empowerment that I am talking about.
और जिसके लिए सभी परेशान है, उस एम्पावरमेंट के लिए जो हमारे पास ही है।
हाँ, मैं मान लीजिए कि अगर आप जब हीन भावना से निकल जाते हैं और क्या कहते हैं, आप ट्रांसेंड कर लेते हैं, तो आपको धोती कुर्ता पहन करके जाने में जो है मतलब कोई ये नहीं है। और अगर हुआ तो क्या कहते हैं, वो सूट भी पहन लेंगे।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
लेकिन उसमें ये तो नहीं होगा ना कि मैं सूट पहन करके जो है मैं अपने आप को बहुत सिविलाइज समझता हूँ।
तभी इंटेलिजेंट दिखता हूँ, बुद्धिमान दिखता हूँ।
हाँ, तो कुर्ता पजामा पहन करके
कहीं ना कहीं हमारे ज्ञान की कमी होती है, जो हम एक्चुअल में अपने आप को ही नहीं समझ पा रहे हैं। जैसे हम अपने आप को समझते तो हमारी पर्सनालिटी का रिफ्लेक्शन होता है, हमारे कपड़ों का नहीं। कपड़े हमारे रिफ्लेक्ट में दिखेंगे, हम नहीं कपड़ों के रिफ्लेक्शन में दिखेंगे। जैसी
और ये देखिए सबसे, और दूसरी बात ये है, और ये बात छोटी है लेकिन इसके इम्प्लीकेशंस बड़े हैं। कहने का मतलब ये है कि आज भी जिस तरह की भारत में गर्मी होती है इन मोस्ट पार्ट्स, आज भी जो है ये पैंट शर्ट जो है ये एक अच्छा ड्रेस नहीं है। ऊपर से आप बता रही थी कि लोगों को टाई पहना है। ये ड्रेस अच्छा नहीं है। आज भी गर्मी में मैं पैजामा कुर्ता भी नहीं कहूंगा, मैं कहूंगा कि धोती कुर्ता में जो आराम है गर्मी में, आज भी वो क्या कहते हैं, वो किसी दूसरे ड्रेस में नहीं है। लेकिन फिर भी आप सोचिए कि हमारी क्या स्थिति हो गई है कि हमको गर्मी लग रही है, हम पसीने से लत हैं, लेकिन फिर भी जो है हमारे जो हमारे कपड़े हैं जिसको कि पहना जा रहा है, हम नहीं पहनते हैं। क्योंकि अगर हम पहनेंगे तो लोग, हमें भय होता है कि हमें लोग हे दृष्टि से देखेंगे। तो मैं फिर से ये कह रहा हूँ कि बात ये छोटी छोटी इनसे ये बात शुरू करनी है और इसी को बड़ा बड़ा बढ़ाना है।
बिल्कुल
कि वो हम क्या कहते हैं, हम वो इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स को एक्सप्लोर करने के पहले इन सब छोटी बातों का तो हिसाब किताब कर लें पहले।
हाँ, जो हमारे आसपास हो रहा है ये ज्यादा जरूरी है। इसी से बच्चे भी हमारे देखते हैं, जो हम करते हैं वही हमारे बच्चे करते हैं। जब हम वो करते हैं बातें, बच्चों को हम अपने स्टूडेंट को कुछ और सिखाते हैं और घर में कुछ और करते हैं, तो हमारे बच्चे ही वही रूल फॉलो नहीं कर रहे होते जो हम बच्चों को सिखा के आते हैं कॉलेज में स्टूडेंट को। ये हमारे बहुत है। और सर जो ये अभी आप कुर्ता धोती की बात कर रहे थे, मैं एज एनवायरमेंटलिस्ट भी हूँ और बनस्पति में मैंने काम किया, तो ये इको फ्रेंडली है अकॉर्डिंग टू द एनवायरमेंट कंडीशन ऑफ इंडिया। ये जो ड्रेसेस हैं ये इको फ्रेंडली है, इनसे स्किन डिजीज होने के नील चांसेस हैं। और हमारी स्किन को फ्रेश एयर नहीं मिलती, जिससे स्किन डिजीज होने के चांसेस बहुत हो जाते हैं, खास करके रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट में। और अगर ये धोती कुर्ता चाहे फीमेल हो या मेल हो जो धोती पहनते हैं, उससे रिप्रोडक्टिव पार्ट में डिजीज होने के चांसेस, खास करके इन्फेक्शन होने के चांसेस 80% कम हो जाते हैं ड्यू टू द इको फ्रेंडली ड्रेसेस। तो मैंने कहा हर कल्चर का, हमारे हर ट्रेडिशन का हमारे साइंटिफिक रीजन है। और अगर हम उसे उसी तरह करें तो हम अपने आप में कॉन्फिडेंस भी, और हमारा जो नॉलेज सिस्टम है वो भी इम्प्रूव होगा, हमारी सोसाइटी जो है वो भी हेल्थफुल हो जाएगी। मतलब हर मामले में हम लोग की डिजीज होने के चांसेस कम हो जाएंगे, जैसा कि कोरोना का इफेक्ट हमारे इंडिया में कम हुआ ड्यू टू द ट्रेडिशन एंड द ट्रेडिशनल फूड हमारे लिए हेल्पफुल रहे। तो हम बहुत आगे चले जाएंगे अगर हम सिर्फ अपनी डेली लाइफ में जो हमारे ट्रेडिशंस हैं, कल्चर हैं, उनको फिर से यूज करना शुरू कर दें।
इसी से रिलेटेड आपको क्या कहते हैं, दूसरी बात बता रहा हूँ, जो लेयर्स की बात कर रहा हूँ। अब आप जैसे देखिए, जो कॉलोनियल और पोस्ट कॉलोनियल इंडिया में जिस सामग्री का प्रयोग होता है घर बनाने के लिए, वो इंडियन कंडीशंस के लिए फिट नहीं है।
बिल्कुल नहीं,
बिल्कुल फिट नहीं है। अब क्या कहते हैं, अब जब आप ऐसे घर बनाते हैं तो इन घरों में गर्मी भी ज्यादा होती है, ठंड भी ज्यादा होती है। अब आपको क्या कहते हैं, अब आप उसको, हाँ वो तो है, और उसके लिए जो है अब आपको एयर कंडीशनर का उपयोग करना होता है। और दिल्ली के कुछ पार्ट्स ऐसे हैं जो कि हीट सिंक बन जाते हैं, हीट स्केप ही नहीं करता है एटमॉस्फेयर, राइट। तो ये सारे इश्यूज जो है एक नहीं है, मतलब ये बहुत सारे इसमें जाता है। अब फिर जब मान लीजिए कि ये डीकोलोनियलिटी की बात आती है, डिकॉलोनाइजेशन की बात होती है, तो फिर रिसर्च का मुद्दा उठता है कि प्री कॉलोनियल इंडिया में जो है लोग घर कैसे बनाते थे, क्या करते थे। आज भी कुछ क्या कहते हैं, कुछ उस समय के घर मिल जाएंगे। अब पता करना पड़ेगा उसमें कि वो क्या सामग्री यूज कर रहे थे, क्या टेक्निक यूज कर रहे थे, क्योंकि सारे कारीगर को तो इन लोगों ने मार दिया।
बिल्कुल
फैमिन्स करा करके हमारे देश में जो 5 करोड़ लोगों को जो मारा है इन लोगों ने, तो वो तो सब क्या कहते हैं, वो तो सब चले गए। सारा क्या कहते हैं, वो इकोनॉमी जो है, इकोनॉमी अगर, तो इन सबको फिर से ढूंढना पड़ेगा। we'll have to find them out। तो कितने सारे डायरेक्शंस में जाते हैं, और ये देखिए कि पॉसिबिलिटीज कितनी बढ़ती हैं, कितनी बढ़ती हैं, रिसर्च करने के आयाम कितने बढ़ते हैं, कितनी ज्यादा पॉसिबिलिटीज हैं। आई थिंक दीज आर सम ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट वी हैव टू एंगेज इन। आप लोग क्या कहते हैं, हम लोग कॉम्पिटेंसीज की बात कर रहे हैं, पेडागोजी की बात कर रहे हैं, अपने अपने एरिया में हम क्या क्या कर सकते हैं इन सारी चीजों के लिए।
लेकिन आज के स्टूडेंट सर इंटरेस्टेड हैं बिल्कुल पूरी तरह से। उन्हें ना ये नॉलेज और ये नॉलेज सिस्टम अच्छा लगता है। ऐसा नहीं कि वो बिल्कुल दूर भागते कि नहीं इंडियन के जो सिस्टम है बुरे हैं। आज भी वो आर्यभट्ट और बरहमीर को पढ़ना पसंद करते हैं। ये अलग बात है कि उनको अच्छे पैकेज के लिए इंग्लिश पढ़ना पड़ता है और ये नॉलेज है, बट वो उसका रिस्पेक्ट करना भी जानते हैं। और आपको 100 स्टूडेंट में कम से कम नहीं 60 और 70 मिल जाएंगे। बट वो थोड़ा सा
तो
हमारा सिलेबस हमारा ऐसा है कि उनको उसमें दिया अलग से पढ़ने का टाइम नहीं होता। अगर वो सिलेबस में अब इंक्लूड कर दिया गया तो आई थिंक हमें 4 से 5 साल में इफेक्ट अच्छा दिखेगा आने वाले समय में।
एब्सोल्युटली, वो तो प्रोसेस है, ये तो शुरू हुआ है। तो ठीक है सुमन जी, तो यू आर वेरी वेलकम। राजीव जी।
नमस्कार
नमस्कार
सिंह। So आपने बहुत सारी अच्छी बातें हुई, आपने एक बहुत अच्छी बात कही तो कि साइकोलॉजी में जो स्टार्टिंग पॉइंट्स हैं वो इंडिया से बहुत सारी चीजें आई हैं। तो मैं दो बातें कहना चाहूंगा। एक तो कार्ल जंग को कोट करना चाहूंगा कि उन्होंने कहा था कि मतलब यू कैन कीप अ चाइल्ड ऑब्लिवियस फ्रॉम द प्रीवियस मिथ्स बट यू कैन नॉट कीप अ चाइल्ड लर्निंग फ्रॉम द मिथ्स। मतलब कि कहने का मतलब ये कि माइथोलॉजी एज ए इपिस्टीम की बात हो रही थी, तो मतलब माइथोलॉजी एज ए इपिस्टीम जो हमारा बहुत ही डीप इपिस्टीम है, उससे लर्निंग जो है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट रहा है और इथिकल बिहेवियर की बहुत बात होती है, तो वो एक इम्पॉर्टेंट फैक्टर है। तो उस पे और वो वैल्यू डिक्लाइन की बात, तो इस पे काफी चर्चा हो रही थी, तो ऐसे ही मैंने सोचा। और इसी कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक और बात हो रही थी कि अंग्रेजी भाषा से लोग बहुत ज्यादा ग्रसित हो जाते हैं। तो बैंगलोर कॉलिंग करके एक वृंदा नारायण जी की किताब है, तो उसमें वो डिपिक्ट करती हैं कि मतलब बहुत सारी बातें कि कैसे लोग अमेरिकन कल्चर और मतलब बाहर के कल्चर से बिना देखे जाने कि वहाँ के लोग भी बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो बहुत अलग तरीके के हैं, लेकिन जाने बिना बस फोन के कॉल सेंटर से एक व्यू बना लेते हैं कि ऐसे ही होंगे, और एक थॉट प्रोसेस बन जाता है क्योंकि अंग्रेजी में ऐसे बात करते हैं तो एक एक्सेंट हो जाता है, ऐसे कपड़े पहनते होंगे, एक थिंकिंग बन जाती है। तो मैं यही कहना चाहूंगा, आजकल मैं बैंगलोर में रह रहा हूँ, तो बैंगलोर नाउ नॉट ओनली कॉल्स बट ऑल्सो स्पीक्स। तो ये दो बातें। तो अब एजुकेशन की बात है, अरविंदो जी की मतलब नमस्कार करते हुए कहता हूँ कि मतलब फोटोग्राफ लगी हुई है पीछे। तो मैं यही सवाल पूछना चाहूंगा कि कर्मण्यता और अकर्मण्यता जो किताबें उन्होंने गीता का जो संस्करण है उन्होंने लिखा है, उस पे आपके क्या विचार हैं और आपकी क्या अंडरस्टैंडिंग हुई है कि वो क्या लिखते हैं इस पे? मुझे ये बात
मुझे
कभी
अगर क्या कहते हैं,
समझ।
अगर आप कोट कर देते तो मुझे ध्यान हो
जी
कि
नहीं,
एसेज
वो
ऑफ द गीता
हाँ उन्होंने
कहाँ पर
ये,
लिखा है,
हाँ वो आई थिंक
क्या क्या लिखा है, तो मैं
17th चैप्टर में जो उनके गीता के वॉल्यूम्स हैं उसमें वो
जी
बात करते हैं कि कर्म और मतलब अकर्म में मतलब
जी
कब कर्म करना चाहिए और कब नहीं करना चाहिए, और मतलब कर्म करना चाहिए और नहीं करना चाहिए, अर्जुन को जो उपदेश चल रहा है, तो
जी
क्या मतलब क्या सही है क्या गलत है, कहीं की ही बात चल रही है ना। तो ये बड़ा ड्विंडलिंग सी बात हो जाती है मेरे लिए कभी कभी कि रुक जाऊं कि करूं, एक्शन एंड इनएक्शन वाली जो बात है वो मुझे कभी समझ नहीं आई। तो इसीलिए मैं कभी रुक जाता हूँ, थम जाता हूँ, कभी कुछ करने लगता हूँ, मतलब कंफ्यूजन तो रहता ही है जीवन में। तो इसी पे आप क्या कुछ व्याख्यान मिल
जी
जाए तो अच्छा
जी नहीं, मेरे मुझे क्या कहते हैं ध्यान नहीं आ रहा है वो डिस्कशन।
है। जी
अगर
जी
आप क्या कहते हैं, अगर वो अगर आप निकाल करके अगर मुझे बता देते तो
जी
शायद मैं कोई कुछ उसके ऊपर यू नो लाइट थ्रो कर सकता था। तो
जी
क्योंकि शेरविन को शेरविन को मैं गुरु मानता हूँ, और मेरी अपनी साधना जो है वो माँ और शेरविन के ही ग्रेस से चल रही है। और तो लेकिन ये वाला जो आप प्रकरण बता रहे हैं कि इसका ध्यान नहीं आ रहा है। लेकिन यूंग के बारे में थोड़ी बातचीत हो सकती है हमारी। यूंग के ऊपर ईस्टर्न इन्फ्लुएंसेस बहुत स्ट्रांग थे।
जी जी
इसके ऊपर किताबें, कुछ रिसर्च भी हुआ है इनफैक्ट। जे जे क्लार्क की एक किताब है, उन्होंने इसके बारे में कहा है। आई थिंक आई विल बी एबल टू पुल आउट दोस बुक्स आल्सो।
जी जी
एक मैं ये आपको कह रहा था कि माइथोलॉजी माइथोलॉजी का जो शब्द है, माइथोलॉजी का भी एक कॉलोनियल कॉन्टेक्स्ट रहा है हमारे लिए। क्योंकि इस डायकोटमी में हिस्ट्री और माइथोलॉजी में क्या हुआ है कि जब हिस्ट्री को प्रिविलेज किया गया और ब्रिटिश या यूरोपियन सोसाइटी का जिस तरह से हिस्टोरिफिकेशन हुआ, इफ यू विल, तो माइथोलॉजी को जो है उसको सप्रेस करना शुरू किया उन लोगों ने। और हमारी पूरी हिस्ट्री को इन लोगों ने हमारे पूरे हिस्ट्री और इतिहास को इन लोगों ने माइथोलॉजी बना दिया। आप समझ रहे हैं?
जी जी।
तो इसीलिए मैं ये कहूंगा कि भारतीय परिवेश में, संस्करण में माइथोलॉजी का प्रयोग जो है वो थोड़ा उसको क्रिटिकली करना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि ये कहानी चली है। और जब हम कोलोनियलिज्म की बात करते हैं, और जो मैं आपको बता रहा था कि कुछ चीजें अभी पब्लिकेशन के प्रोसेस में आ जाएंगी बाहर, तो यूरोपियन कॉन्शियसनेस बाइनरीज के साथ एक और चीज करता है कि जो हाफ को सप्रेस करता है उसी को वो कॉलोनाइज्ड अदर के ऊपर प्रोजेक्ट करता है। तो इन लोगों ने क्या किया कि हमारा जो है, हमारी हिस्ट्री है, और कॉलोनाइज्ड की जो हिस्ट्री है वो माइथोलॉजी है। तो आज भी जो है हम लोग क्या करते हैं, हम लोग इतिहास पुराण को, जो पुराण है उनको इतिहास की तरह नहीं देख करके, या रामायण महाभारत को इतिहास की तरह नहीं देख करके, हम बहुत कॉमनली कहते हैं कि ये माइथोलॉजी। तो हम लोगों को इस चीज से थोड़ा बचना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि ये इतिहास है। अब इसको इतिहास का लिखने का उसका पैराडाइम अलग है। अब पहली बात तो ये भी है कि हम लोगों को वो पैराडाइम समझना पड़ेगा कि किस पैराडाइम में लिखा गया है। लेकिन इसको माइथोलॉजी करार कर देना, ये एक कॉलोनियल प्रोजेक्शन है जिसमें कि हम लोगों को बच जाना चाहिए।
नहीं सर, मैं क्या कहना चाह रहा हूँ, आप मतलब मुझे गलत ना समझिए। मैं ये कहना चाह रहा हूँ कि माइथोलॉजी अपने आप में कहीं ना कहीं साइंस भी हो सकता है। मतलब कार्ल जंग का जो स्टेटमेंट था ना, वो कहीं ना कहीं ये भी कह रहा है, क्योंकि अगर एजुकेशन हो रहा है उसके थ्रू, तो अगर एजुकेशन हम मतलब नॉलेज डिसिमिनेशन जिस चीज से कर रहे हैं, अगर उससे नॉलेज क्रिएशन हो ही नहीं रहा था, तो मतलब डिसिमिनेशन कैसे कर दे रहे थे? मतलब उस स्टेटमेंट का इंटरप्रिटेशन ये भी हो सकता है। मतलब मैं ये नहीं कह रहा कि ये
बिल्कुल उसमें भी राजीव जी थोड़ा क्या करते हैं, इसको हम थोड़ा और क्रिटिकली एग्जामिन करते हैं। इसको आप ये देखिए, और ये हमारे कॉन्वर्सेशन में बहुत बार आया है। मतलब ये आज के कॉन्वर्सेशन, ये किसी चीज को जब हम उसको ट्रुथ का जब वैल्यू देना चाहते हैं, तो हम कहते हैं कि ये साइंटिफिक है या ये साइंस है। ये हम क्यों कर रहे हैं? आप ये बात को समझ रहे हैं कि जो वेस्टर्न पैराडाइम में जो साइंस को प्रिविलेज किया गया है, वो आज हमारे हर एक चीज को नापने का मापदंड हो गया है। हम क्यों कर रहे हैं इस चीज को? तो मैं यही कह रहा हूँ, जो आई होप डॉक्टर प्रधान यहाँ पर हैं, जो मैं उनको कह रहा था, कॉलोनियल इम्पैक्ट ये छोटा मोटा इम्पैक्ट नहीं है। ये छोटा मोटा इम्पैक्ट नहीं है। इसके रूट्स जो हैं वो बहुत डीप जाते हैं, और उनके रूट्स को उखाड़ना बहुत जरूरी होता है। मैं जैसे यही बता रहा हूँ, हम क्यों साइंस को इन्वोक कर रहे हैं? वाई? साइंस वो भी जो कि क्या कहते हैं, मैसिवली लिमिटेड है। उनका बेसिक फंडामेंटल अजम्पशन पैराडाइम का क्या है कूनियन टर्म्स में? उसका डिसिप्लिनरी मैट्रिक्स क्या है? उसका शेयर्ड एग्जाम्पलार क्या है? उसका शेयर्ड एग्जाम्पलार ये है कि वही रियल है जो कि 5 सेंसेस से एक्सेसिबल है, और उस रियलिटी को आप 5 सेंसेस के ही थ्रू आप एक्सप्लोर कर सकते हैं, उसके बियॉन्ड नहीं। उसको वो साइंस कहते हैं, और हम साइंस का माला जपते हैं। हमारा विज्ञान जो है, या हमारा अध्यात्म, या हमारा ज्ञान जो है, ये हमारी ज्ञान परंपरा है, वो तो सेंसेस को ट्रांसेंड करने के बाद और माइंड को ट्रांसेंड करने के बाद शुरू होती है। आप सोच करके देखें इस बात को।
जी, आप आज्ञा दे तो एक बात कहूं, क्योंकि डॉक्टर प्रधान की बात उठी, वो फिजिसिस्ट हैं। उतना फिजिक्स तो अब मैं नहीं याद रख पाया हूँ, काफी साल हो गए फिजिक्स नहीं। तो लेकिन मुझे याद है जब मैं इंजीनियरिंग स्टूडेंट हुआ करता था तो लार्ज हैड्रॉन कोलिडर एक्सपेरिमेंट हो रहा था. आई वाज आल्सो पार्ट इन द सेंस दैट आई आल्सो रिप्रेजेंटेड माय यूनिवर्सिटी इन डायलॉग. तो 2010 अप्रैल. सो ये गॉड्स ओन पार्टिकल पे सम डिबेट स्टार्टेड. तो ये इतने बड़े बड़े एक्सपेरिमेंट होते हैं, मनी गेट्स पम्प्ड इन और बहुत सारी बातें होती हैं. इट्स आल्सो मतलब इकोनॉमिक्स इन्वॉल्व, देयर इज अ फिलोसफी, बहुत सारी चीजें. मतलब आई स्टार्टेड फंडामेंटली क्वेश्चनिंग द फिलोसफिकल फाउंडेशंस ऑफ फिजिक्स देयर. And debates started happening. Obviously there is also a limited time, but then philosophy of God's own particle, the name itself is very interesting actually. So anyways, not going too much into it, the point is that we can think physics doing finding God's own particle when that time Stephen Hawking was also there. So and he has never contended God. And we can say that he was one of the greatest physicists. But we can not say there are other also. I'm not saying a lot of them. Fridtjof Capra was mentioned. There are others there. So I'm not saying anything more. But it is understood. So you talked about the five senses. There are other senses that we talk about dimensions. 13 dimensions by Lisa Randall. But are there only 13 dimensions? It can be many more. But anyways, I will stop at that. I have my own limitations.
No. This is good. I think it's a part of ये आज जो basic आज हमारा topic भी वही है. ये challenges क्या हैं, systemic क्या हैं, methodological क्या है, pedagogical क्या है, competitive. तो ये सारे questions तो
Yes, so in terms of disciplines, we think that these are the kind of disciplines. Actually, I also had a chance to meet, I think, I am very forgetful with names. So, but Dr. Vasisht Narayan once, while traveling with the auto rickshaw. So I belong to Patna. So from the Digha Ghat to the Ashok Rajpath, very interesting place. So he was sitting there. I never spoke to him, but he was just, he sat, he was in the last days, some 2-3 years before he passed away. But he was just sitting and in front of me. I never talked. I never gathered the courage to talk to he was such a great person, but you should not feel like that. I should have spoken to him, but anyways, but these are some things that are there. But the point I'm trying to make here is that means are there only these kind of dimensions that mathematicians pose, or only these kind of things? And are the sciences not putting limitations, as you are telling, in the social science paradigm, and there is not a hierarchy of sciences that are there? So there is some issues which are very fundamental, which are crippling things.
Right. देखिए वो क्या कहते हैं, वो ठीक है, वो गॉड पार्टिकल के बारे में बात करेगा, वो डिफरेंट डिमेंशंस के बारे में बात करेगा, लेकिन अल्टीमेटली उसका एक्सप्लोरेशन जो है वो इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स के ही थ्रू करेगा, जो कि एक्सटेंशंस होंगे 5 सेंसेस के, उसके बियॉन्ड नहीं जाएगा.
करेक्ट.
वो क्या कहते हैं, वो लिमिटेशन, वो आवरण उसने अपने ऊपर डाला हुआ है, वो आवरण के बियॉन्ड नहीं जाएगा. मेरे कहने का मतलब है कि ठीक है, उसमें जितने लोग संलग्न हैं, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, वो करें अपनी बात. लेकिन मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि ठीक है, वो उसको एक्सप्लोर करना चाहते हैं, बिल्कुल सही बात है, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है, वो सब ये नहीं. लेकिन जो जिस तरह से हमारी पद्धति में, जो हमारे इनफैक्ट वो ये है भी नहीं, इनफैक्ट द डायकोटमी इज नॉट देयर. अगर आप क्या कहते हैं, आप मेरे ख्याल से मैं एक दिन, जिस दिन मेरा टॉक था, उसके पहले प्रोफेसर वीएन झा आए हुए थे, तो न्याय वैशेषिका के बारे में बात कर रहे थे. तो मैं ये, अगर आप ये देखें, अगर जिस तरह से जो हमारे दर्शन है, उसमें क्या ये है, वैशेषिक है, राइट. अगर आप वैशेषिक को, अगर आप कंप्लीटली, अगर सिर्फ आप वैशेषिक को लें, तो वैशेषिक आपको मटेरियल रियलिटी को एक्सप्लोर करने की पूरी मेथोडोलॉजी देता है, ठीक है। अगर आप न्याय को, अगर आप सिर्फ अगर आप न्याय वैशेषिक को नहीं, क्योंकि न्याय वैशेषिक बाद में साथ हो गया था, न्याय को अगर आप देखें तो न्याय आपको किसी चीज को आप उसको लॉजिकली आर्ग्यू करने में आपको बहुत बहुत मदद करेगा। वो बेसिकली वो इंटेलेक्चुअल रेल्म को, वो माइंड के रेल्म को जो है उसको एक्सप्लोर कराता है। एक जो है वैशेषिक जो है वो आपका अन्नमय कोश, मतलब मटेरियल वर्ल्ड को आपको एक्सप्लोर करने का सारा वेयर विथॉल दे रहा है। न्याय जो है वो आपको इंटेलेक्चुअल, लॉजिकल, मेंटल रेल्म को एक्सप्लोर करने का सारा तरीका दे रहा है। उसके बाद जब आप बढ़ते हैं, जब उसमें क्या कहते हैं, सांख्य आता है, बुद्धिज्म आता है, बाकी सारे ये आते हैं, ये सारे एरियाज जो हैं दे आर बियॉन्ड माइंड एंड सेंसेस। तो ये कहना कि हमारी पद्धति जो है वो मटेरियल साइंसेस से अपोज्ड है, वो बिल्कुल गलत हो जाएगा। वो क्या कहते हैं, वो एक गलत डायकोटमी क्रिएट हो जाएगा। ये सारा जो है ये एक स्पेक्ट्रम में है, बिल्कुल वो एक स्पेक्ट्रम में है। और इसीलिए अब वो उपनिषद मुझे याद नहीं है, ये उपनिषद, एक उपनिषद में कहा गया है कि विद्या और अविद्या, मेरे ख्याल से ईशो उपनिषद में, कि विद्या और अविद्या दोनों को परस्यू करना है। उस उपनिषद के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में अविद्या क्या है, वो इग्नोरेंस नहीं है, दैट इज द नॉलेज ऑफ द फिनोमिनल वर्ल्ड, जो क्या कहते हैं, जो हमारे सेंसेस और माइंड से जो एक्सप्लोर हो रहे हैं। और विद्या क्या है, जो आपका ट्रांसेंडेंटल वर्ल्ड है। तो उसमें ये कहा, उसमें बहुत क्लियर इंस्ट्रक्शंस है कि दोनों को एक्सप्लोर कीजिए, विद्या को भी और अविद्या को। उसमें ये कहा गया है कि जो विद्या को नहीं जानता है वो तो लॉस्ट है ही, अब मैं उसका ट्रांसलेशन बता रहा हूँ, और जो नहीं, और अविद्या को नहीं जानता है वो तो घने अंधकार में,
लॉस्ट फ्रैंकेनस्टाइन टाइप का। ओके,
हाँ।
सॉरी सर।
तो कहने का मतलब है कि एंटायर हमारा जो ट्रेडिशन था वो पूरे स्पेक्ट्रम को इवॉल्व कराता था। इसी कारण हमारे यहाँ साइंसेस जो हैं, जिनको कि हम साइंसेस आज के परिभाषा में कहते हैं, वो भी प्रचुर मात्रा में थे, क्योंकि वैशेषिक भी था और न्याय भी था। और ये पद्धतियां जो हैं वो आपको क्या कहते हैं, वो करवाती थी, वो आपको डिटेल्स देती थी, वो आपको एपिस्टेमोलॉजीज देती थी। तो इट्स अ वेरी ब्यूटीफुल सिस्टम। तो मैं वही कह रहा था कि साइंस में एंगेज करना भी बहुत जरूरी है, और साइंस का क्रिटिकल अंडरस्टैंडिंग भी होना बहुत जरूरी है। और जो साइंस का करंट डेफिनेशन है उसको हमारे सिस्टम पे उसको इम्पोज भी नहीं करना है, क्योंकि फिर वो लिमिटिंग हो जाता है। जिस तरह से हमारे पुराने इसमें था ना कि आप गृहस्थ जो है खत्म कीजिए, उसके बाद सब चीज त्यागिए और वानप्रस्थ और संन्यास की तरफ निकल जाइए। वो वही है कि एक समय तक फिजिकल साइंसेस किया, उसके बाद ठीक है वो लिमिटेशन साइंस से समझा, और उसके बाद कुछ नहीं, आंख बंद करके ध्यान लगा करके बैठ गए। तो वहां जो है वो क्या कहते हैं, वो एक अलग ही दुनिया उभरती है, अलग ही दुनिया आती है। तो राजीव जी,
जी
आगे बढ़ूं आपसे फिर?
जी जी बिल्कुल,
नमस्कार। असीमा जी,
Pranam, am I audible?
Absolutely, you are.
Yeah, Pranam, please. So, very humbly, I want to ask one question. Actually, coming to our new concepts and propositions. In that aspect, I have a query. Of course, I came to know, I agree with all of your points and everything. For example, when we are going to establish one concept which has arisen within ourselves, and we have already done a lot of work on that. For example, we all of us are very much acquainted with Darwinism, the theory of evolution that has been established by now. And many of the theories which are falsified till now also, like Lamarckism, Neo-Lamarckism, Darwinism, Neo-Darwinism, then modern synthetic theory, and like this. Basically, I am a DNA biologist and a doctorate and postdoc from Indian Council of Medical Research. A lot of molecular biology works I have done, especially on mutations and resistance. Okay. So very fundamental question arises here, doctor, that why at all resistance? Why the organism wants to resist? Why there is a mutation? What is prior to mutation? What is before mutation? So there comes the point, it is the urge of the organism to live, urge of the organism to be stable in the environment or to continue in the environment or in the ecosystem. So coming to this point, evolution says that Darwin has also given one point in the chapter 7, that is instinct. Instinct is nothing but very fundamental to our origin, that is mental power. But throughout the system of our teaching of evolution, you will find there is no such point of instinct or mental power or urge. So, obviously, we are avoiding the things like species evolution, where we are avoiding the individual conscious evolution to strive to live and reproduce. For example, second point, random mutation, we are just avoiding the determinism of urge of the organism. Coming to the third one, natural selection, we are just avoiding, it is not natural, it is just the urge to live. For example, fourth point, adaptation is one effect, but adaptation is willful adaptation. Otherwise, when the tails of the mouse were mutated by wise men, they didn't adapted to that particular system, or they didn't leave their tails after 100 generations even, because that was not the will of the mice, rather it was the wish of the scientist. So unchangeable individual DNA, where avoidance of the inheritance of the acquired characters. And when they established that the giraffe got elongated neck, at that time, it was the urge, intense urge in the giraffe to get food and survive. So this particular aspect is nothing but instinct or urge, or it is the impression within us which comes in the form of urge. So this is really making the genetic changes or the change in the information or mutation, or that is the information which is really driving us towards other aspects, what we are saying, anatomy, morphology, whatever we are saying. So in this regard, I humbly I want to mention, Dr. here, I have worked with Dr. Rajat Pradhan for around a decade to establish this in epigenetics. What our thought is doing, that is our instinct. It may be a pure intelligence, it may be intelligence, it may be impure intelligence also. So instinct has different aspects as per Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So epigenetics is the change in the DNA in the level of methylation, so we can justify it. And in that aspect, I have given one proposal to university as a project, new paradigms of evolution and theory synthesis. And where you cannot imagine, it is a very poor condition of mind to represent you very humbly that they just rejected my proposal. They just rejected. And on this basis, we have near about 47 publications. They rejected on the basis that this cannot be a proposal, this cannot be taken into science, this, why it cannot be taken into science is not our mind power involved in science, is not our psyche involved in science, is there no cause before mutation? And when we were just reading that cork is the just compartments which are called cells, but now there is mitochondria, there is Golgi, but it is not that they were not existing, they were existing. Only thing is advanced instruments were not available during that time. So I just want to come to my point. This was my basic things which I wanted to explain you so that you can catch my point, that how can we really come up with our concepts if the dignitaries in the position are not going to be open and come to allow us, facilitate us to really establish the Indian knowledge system exactly tells that it is the impression which is carried forward in the mind, and that gives rebirth and regeneration. And through this, we wanted to establish rebirth and regeneration. So, Doctor, if you are in a very established and renowned position, how can you help us to work in this area so that we can establish? And I assure that I will be able to establish in the genetic field because I have great expertise in molecular biology, RT-PCR, PCR, and gene sequencing and everything. So, if this is my conclusion to my explanation, I will.
Thank you. See, I think, very well put, very well put. I would say, in order to create space for something which you want to bring, which the wider scientific community is not accepting, the best way to go about it is to critique the existing paradigm. I shared those two articles of mine. I'm talking about philosophy, postmodern philosophy of science. Health can be taken over there. Now, see, I can see it very clearly, despite the fact that that Dr. Pradhan was saying that the subjectivity is getting introduced and so on and so forth. I still see that the subjective-objective dichotomy is operational, and because thought and psyche are being conflated with subjective, that the subjective is getting suppressed, which is not finding any expression in the research paradigm that they are following. So, it's a problem of the paradigm. It's not the problem of your research. Because as we discussed there, that, that from our Vedantic perspective, there are at least 5 planes of existence, right? And all these planes are influencing one another. They're interacting with one another. Pranamaya kosha is interacting with Annamaya kosha, Manomaya with the thought that you're talking about. The thought is influencing, the molecule. And what I gathered from Dr. Pradhan, it seems that he's familiar with Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. The crux of integral yoga is the transformation of the cells. Right? You must be familiar with that. Yes. Of course, Sri Aurobindo and the mother are not talking about transformation of cells, by dint of thought. They're talking about the transformation through the use of supramental force. But when you take this paradigm into account, right, it becomes very clear that thought can influence the body. It can influence the cells. Thought has that power. But because of this prevalence of subjective-objective dichotomy in which subjective is getting suppressed, they are not allowing your research because of the paradigm that they are following. It's a paradigmatic problem. It's basically because what you are suggesting is in contradiction to the fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality that they have. This is point number one. The second point is that most scientists, they believe in the philosophy of epiphenomenalism. So what is consciousness or what is thought? It is a byproduct of the interactions or the reactions that are happening at the cellular level. Whether they believe in it consciously or not, this is a fundamental belief of theirs. So thought, or what they call consciousness, is an epiphenomena. It is not a phenomena, it is an epiphenomena. It's a result of what is happening at the cellular level. So in their understanding, what is at the bottom, what is at the level of cell, that is affecting the thought. It is not the other way around. You see? So again, going back, to some of the fundamental assumptions that they have in their paradigm is what is causing the problems that you're facing. I mean, that's how I look at it.
Right. Doctor, one thing more, just I want to ask you, if once you find time to have a clear discussion with us, and if you can facilitate us to establish, because I tried hard to establish just the concept somewhere in a registered manner, but I could not. If you can have a facilitating hand for us,
I will be very happy to have a conversation with both of you. Absolutely. And I will be I'll be more than willing to help in any which way I can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please take my email address from Richard G. In fact, let me give it to all of you. It's very simple, kundan.singh at hua.edu.
Right.
So, my email address is with Richard G. So any one of you, who's interested in getting in touch with me, can always write to me or can write to me through Richard G.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Asimaji. Thank you. Thank you. So, Sanjana ji, it's your turn now.
Namaste, Kundan ji. Namaste to all. I'm from Engineering College, and first time I'm attending this FDP. All these concepts are very new for me and very interesting. I want to implement IKS in my institute. Then how can I go, or how can I start?
Just give me 1 second. I have run out of battery. Just give me one quick moment. I'll be right back. Let me put it in the case and. University. Which university is this?
Not audible.
Not audible?
Not audible.
Okay, just give me 1 second.
But we can hear him, I believe.
Sir, you are audible, sir.
Yeah, now you are audible, sir.
How about now?
You're audible. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah. You are
Okay.
audible.
Okay. So I think I won't be able to answer that question in such brief time. I will need to understand more things. I will need to understand what you do at your university. What possibilities you have. So why don't we set up an appointment, for sometime little later, and then we'll have a detailed conversation. Please write to me. Please write to me.
Yeah.
Kundan ji, if you allow me, I can give answer.
Please go ahead.
Actually, I can just. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Okay. You see, it is all about, the mindset change. And if you are clear in your thought and you know that what value you are going to add, the whole universe will partner with you. I can share my experience. I teach in this OP Jindal Global University, which is promoted by Congress leadership. One very prominent MP is the main founder. So whenever I thought about creating those centers, like Center for Mindfulness, Spirituality, and Ethical Leadership, I was frowned upon by people there. And launching course on ancient wisdom, Bhagavad Gita, self-awareness and mindful leadership. So initially when I was launching these courses, even my, because I was a professor of finance and accounting all my life. So some people thought, that it is just not going in the right direction. But I started floating a small elective. And once a student started getting value out of it, then the whole sama ban jata hai fir. And then you also start doing a lot of workshop for free for faculty members and all that. And as the world will start spreading your good work, then you will start getting a lot of support over there. And I think before that also there was a professor from Atmiya University who was also asking a similar question. So I believe now you have got a new Vice Chancellor who is my friend, and he will be very happy to support all those initiatives. So I believe that the self-belief and एक होता है ना कि पूरा हार्टफुल लीडरशिप पूरे पैशन के साथ लग गए तो सारी बाधाएं दूर हो जाती हैं. It is a very simple way I would like to share this. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you, Pankaj ji.
Thank you, Pankaj ji.
So
Thank you,
there are two more people.
Kundan ji, I will mail you and we'll discuss. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we have Subarna ji and Swati ji, so we can go to Subarna ji and take a question or a response.
Yes, Kundan ji, Professor Kundan, I'm waiting since long.
Oh, sorry, I haven't seen your hand, I'm so sorry. Is it okay, Subarna ji, if I take Nisha ji's question first?
Sure, sir, no problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, when thanks is a very small word to share and to listen a person like you. And the first thing which I really appreciate is your patience of listening a small question in a number of ways, a number of lines which can be asked in a single line. So I was just testing my patience that I'm really not that kind of person who can listen such a long period, a simple question. So that is a wonderful thing which I'm learning from you. And my question is, I'm working on social innovation, social business, social entrepreneurship, where I am looking at how Indian culture or Indian ways of business can be promoted in India. And we are a word guru, but we have forgotten our culture of promoting business through the Indian way, through Indian art, culture, drama, and the way of dharmas, this dharamshalas were working, and the people were doing business, exchanging business. But that art, that culture has gradually disappeared. But still, now we have started working and promoting this kind of business. So, what you can suggest us, academicians of Indian academicians, to promote social business, social innovation in the institutional level, in university level, maybe from undergraduate to graduate level, where we can promote social business, social innovation, where we can stop migration of, we cannot stop actually, we cannot, but at least we can minimize the migration from the different areas, and we can sustain our own business and our own culture. Maybe it is a farming, maybe it is organic farming, and it is a dance form, or our dresses, what we have discussed since last 2 hours, and many more things which you can conceptualize better than me.
In fact, Nishaji, I would say that I would not be able to offer you much help in this direction, because I don't understand the world of business at all. Honestly speaking, my mind has not gone in that direction. In fact, when I was in college and, and when we were trying to figure out our vocations, I was very clear about one thing. I had confusions around some others. And that was that I'm not going to go in the direction of management. So because, I have not had any experience with this field, and I have not thought about this field, I would say that any advice, which I would give you will be off, because I haven't studied it at all. I don't know, as a part of this workshop, Dr. Vaidyanathan from IIM Bangalore,
Yes. Yeah.
He is one individual who has done some work on this.
Right.
I just very vaguely know that he has done some work. So I can, best what I can do is that I can direct you towards him.
I have discussed many times with Professor Vaidyanath and Kanat Sabhapati ji, many times. And Anil Maheshwari ji, I think you know him very, Anil Maheshwari ji from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi University, US. I have also discussed with him to work around this area on social innovation and social business. That is mainly focusing on Indian culture and Indian philosophy. That's how I was thinking, direction of research.
Yeah, no, I have not thought about this at all. Actually, I have zero knowledge on this.
So, maybe Jindal University, there someone must be working in this area.
Possibly.
Possibly. Yeah, but this area is emerging. This area is emerging. Social business and social is emerging area, and in not only in India, many countries are focusing on reviving the culture and reviving the business with that is localization of sustainable development. We're talking about SDG 17, and we talk about that we have to reduce hunger and poverty and women empowerment. But that can be possible if we talk about localization of sustainable development. So local resource managing the local resources and providing job through the local resources and commercialization of local resources.
Nishaji, one thing I can tell you, and that would be that this local global dichotomy within the Indian context could be a problematic one. Why am I saying this? In the pre-colonial times, to the best of my understanding, products were produced locally, of course, right? But their export was far and wide, So it was, of course, it's like in responding to the colonial situation, Gandhiji came up with the village system, and and he started talking about things local and so on and so forth. This was
that is concept of Sarvodaya, what he talked about,
taken over by Schumacher also, and all of that. But to the best of my understanding, I think global and local were not placed in a dichotomous division, but they were interactive. And I think that is the model that we should incorporate, number one. And I would also say that, we need to figure out how the business community, which was vast in pre-colonial India, actually conducted its business. I think, that knowledge is lacking at this point in time. And we would need to explore. See, what happens is that, when people begin to talk about or deal with pre-colonial situation, they tend to project a lot and they tend to imagine things a lot, and we need to kind of, preclude ourselves from doing this. We need to be very careful. We need to be very careful in that we are not projecting anything onto the past. And for that, we will need to very carefully look at evidence. And I think that some ancient text somewhere, will basically give us the secrets. Now, it is possible that someone has already found those secrets, or those secrets are lying in some texts. But that knowledge, was there in India. I'm pretty much sure that the knowledge has been textualized. We basically need to find that person, who's aware with those texts where these things have been described, or keep looking for the texts, but definitely not project. That's what I think.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you have given me a new perspective of looking at the Indian text from the business perspective.
Yeah, because look at Harappan civilization, for instance.
Yeah, we can derive how they have done business during that period.
Yeah,
how they must be doing.
Those people, they were sending their goods 4,000 miles on small ships, right? Up to Oman and even further, till Mesopotamia. That was the extent of their civilization.
Right.
So, if they were so local, they would have never engaged in such kind of an activity. So saying that, that the pre-colonial Indians or the ancient Indians, they operated in a paradigm which was localized, I don't think it is true. And it also does not agree with our cosmology, Our cosmology is a very interconnected cosmology. You see? So let me quickly go to Subarna ji now, and then Swati ji is there. I think we are.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Oh, you're very welcome. We are coming to an end to the session as well. So yes, Subarna ji, please.
Thank you, sir. I find that really I'm blessed enough to address this scholarly galaxy of people. With humble submission, I would like to place 2 points, one of which is a comment, the other one is a query. The first one, during all these days, I could know that there are so many things to talk about on Indian knowledge systems. So if at all there are so many things, then why can't we place all these information and place before the students or at the very primary level, or maybe not at primary level, at secondary level. So I feel they should be included in NCERT textbooks and even at all regional level schools, so that students at their very beginning stage, they can learn these things. Because just few days back, I was browsing through ancient mathematical knowledge systems, and I found that there are many things to know. And actually, we know many of the things, but we were not aware of the fact that these are discovered or invented by so and so. So I think if these are included in the textbook and at very primary level, then intuition and the other scientific aspects will grow within the students. Now, the second one, which I wanted to ask, but I don't know whether this question fits good to this discussion, but still I will place before you, sir. So one aspect of Indian knowledge system, I think you will definitely agree with me, is our Ayurveda. So our Ayurvedic medicine. So, and which has historical roots in Indian subcontinent. So if this Ayurveda is one such Indian knowledge, can be considered as a part of Indian knowledge system, then why are they not accepted by medical doctors? I find somewhere that they disagree a lot. If you just approach a allopathic doctor, they disagree with their concept. So if there is can we come to some common consensus? Where are we lacking?
Complete adherence in conscious and unconscious ways to Western paradigm, and not inquiring, into the consequences of the colonization. There are many different factors, these are some of the things that we have already discussed. And see, there's another dichotomy which operates in the Western paradigm. It's the knowledge-ignorance dichotomy. So like, all dichotomies, what happens is that one half gets privileged and the other one gets suppressed, So in knowledge superstition dichotomy, knowledge gets privileged and superstition gets suppressed. So whatever gets generated in Western part of the world gets conflated with knowledge, and whatever is coming from non-Western countries or colonized countries, gets conflated with superstition. So the dominant Western paradigm at this point in time, looks at Ayurveda as not knowledge, but superstition. And this narrative unconsciously has been internalized by these doctors, and because they don't inquire, see, our biggest problem of the education system is that the fundamentals or the metaphysics, are never brought into question or discussion. If the fundamentals and metaphysics are brought into question, then what happens is that, people become naturally open to different possibilities. So I think it's a conglomerate of reasons, but these are some of the ones that I spoke to you about.
Yes, sir.
It's lack of inquiry. It's lack of inquiry. If one inquires enough, then one is ready to explore fields that may be considered alien. The doctors are not ready to do that. The paradigm, the paradigm itself needs to be brought into question. The paradigm needs to be questioned. And not everyone is ready to do it. It requires a certain kind of critical reflexivity, if you will, to engage in such kind of activity. And not everyone is endowed with it. Let me put it that way. So I hope that helps. So, I will just take one more question. We are past the hour already, but I think I will have time for one last question, and then I will close. So, Swatiji, I see your hand up. Could you pose your question, please?
जी, प्रणाम सर। बहुत ही इंसाइटफुल, बहुत लर्निंग, बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला सर। इट्स नॉट लाइक अ क्वेश्चन, जस्ट माय ऑब्जर्वेशन। जैसे कि हमने अब तक के सारे सेशंस में मैंने देखे कि हमने फोकस किया है समभाव, कि हमारे पास बैलेंस होनी चाहिए हर चीज की, चाहे वो ड्यूटी एंड राइट्स की हो, चाहे वो लर्निंग टीचिंग की हो, या हमारे जो भी हमारे सिस्टम है, जो भी हम काम कर रहे होते हैं। और जो फर्स्ट हमने जो नाम दिया सर, भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा, दैट इज फ्लो, कंटिन्यूअस एंड हर जगह, नॉट ओनली इन गुरुकुल और इन एनी एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट्स ओनली। ये घर में भी है, ये हमारे सोसाइटी में भी है, हमारे हर वर्क फील्ड में, दैट इज कॉल्ड। एंड अभी हम इसे पॉलिसी बोलते हैं, एजुकेशन पॉलिसी, जो कि रेस्ट्रिक्टेड है ओनली ऑन इंस्टीट्यूशनल एरिया, आई थिंक। तो एजुकेशन एंड नॉलेज, मेरा जस्ट एक सर ये कंसर्न है कि हम जब आप एक सर्वे करते हैं बहुत ही ग्राउंडेड लेवल पे, एक फैमिली में, जहाँ पे भी वहाँ से भी नॉलेज स्टार्ट होता है सर, तो वहाँ पे हम देखते हैं कि हमारा जो माइंडसेट बनता है सर, हम एक मल्टी डिसिप्लिनरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हमारे पास एज अ वुमेन, कि हम आज वर्किंग वुमेन भी है, स्टिल हमें घर के काम भी देखने होते हैं, हमारे बच्चे होते हैं, हमारी फैमिली होती है, हमारी सोसाइटी होती है। तो तब की जो औरतें होती थी सर, उनका बहुत ही फोकस्ड कमिटमेंट टुवर्ड्स देयर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होती थी कि हमें ये काम करना है तो टिल अकॉम्प्लिशमेंट हमें वो वहां तक करना है, नॉट ओनली कि हमने ड्यूटी है हमने कर दी, सामने वाले ने कितना लिया, बट स्टिल वी आर एजुकेटेड। बट हमारे माइंडसेट में सर कहीं ना कहीं ये होता है, टू बी वेरी ऑनेस्ट, कि हमने तो अपना पार्ट कर दिया। जैसा कि डॉक्टर सुमन ने कहा कि हमें सारे मंत्र याद हैं, बहुत सारे मंत्र, बट हमारे बच्चों तक वो नहीं पहुंचाता। दैट वो हमारी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी हुई सर कि हमने वो पास नहीं किया, हमने बस बोल दिया कि ये पढ़ना चाहिए, ये पढ़ लो, बट कितना सीखा बच्चे ने वो हम नहीं काउंट करते। तो ये बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है सर। अगर हम भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा को आज की डेट में लाना चाहते हैं तो घर में सबसे पहले ये चीजें होनी चाहिए कि अगर हमने सीखा तो हमारे पेरेंट्स हमने हमें सिखाया, वो परंपरा दी, वो सिस्टम दिया, बट हम अपने बच्चों को, हम अपने आगे स्टूडेंट्स को वो परंपरा कंटिन्यू नहीं कर पा रहे हैं। दो वी आर एडुकेटेड, वी आर फैसिलिटेटेड विद सो मेनी रिसोर्सेस, फिर भी नहीं दे पा रहे हैं। तो ये बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज। आई थिंक मेथोडोलॉजी पे अब जाते हैं सर, तो ये हमारा प्राइम रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी होनी चाहिए। जैसा कि मैं फील करती हूँ और सर मैं कोशिश करती हूँ कि मैं जितना सिखाऊं और मैं वो चेक करूं कि बच्चे ने वहां तक सीखा या नहीं। तो दैट इज माय कमिटमेंट टुवर्ड्स माय होल रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, माय ड्यूटी। दैट इज द बैलेंस बिटवीन ड्यूटी एंड राइट्स। सो सर मेरा यही कहना था।
नहीं, बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, मैं देखिए, मैं तो उसके इनफैक्ट जो आप कह रही हैं मैं उससे पूरी तरह से सहमत हूँ, और मैं ये भी कह रहा हूँ जो शुरू में मैंने कहा था कि ये सारी कहानी जो है वो सबसे पहले तो अपने से शुरू होती है। अगर आप करिएगा,
हमारी हमारे एंसेस्टर्स जो औरतें थी वो इतनी एडुकेटेड नहीं थी, हमारे ट्राइबल्स जो हैं वो इतने एडुकेटेड नहीं है, बट स्टिल दे आर following all practices of our ancient culture.
Right.
So they are so much knowledgeable than us.
हाँ, तो मतलब कहने का मतलब है कि शाब्दिक ज्ञान ही सिर्फ ज्ञान थोड़ी होता है, ज्ञान तो अलग अलग तरीके का होता है।
जी सर, जी।
हमने आज बना दिए कि अगर आपको शब्दों का ज्ञान है तो आप ज्ञानी हैं, आप शब्द अगर नहीं आते हैं तो लिखना पढ़ना नहीं आता है तो आप ज्ञान नहीं ये करते हैं। लेकिन हमारे यहाँ तो ज्ञान अक्षर से तो नापा नहीं जाता था।
सर मैंने बहुत सारे ओल्ड लेडीज से बहुत सारे टिप्स लिए हैं जो तब की हैं, जो आज हम इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं करते, बट कहीं ना कहीं वो बहुत ज्यादा रिलेवेंट है और बहुत ज्यादा हमें हेल्प करता है। हमें नहीं पता वो सारी चीजें, वो नहीं जानते, हमारे पढ़ाई में भी हमारे सिलेबस में भी नहीं है, जो चीजें उनके पास ऑलरेडी हैं वो ट्रेजर हैं। तो मेरा एक छोटा सा इनिशिएटिव होता है सर कि उनको एक ग्रुप बनाया है मैंने, जो एल्डरली लेडीज हैं, दादी चाची टाइप, तो उनसे मैं टिप्स लेती हूँ उनकी चीजों के, उनके जब वो काम किया करती थी तो क्या क्या कैसे प्लांट्स यूज करती थी, क्या स्पाइसेस यूज करती थी, किस तरह की डेली प्रैक्टिसेस में वो क्या क्या यूज करती थी, और उसको अगर आप लॉजिकली चेक करें तो आज के डेट में वो बहुत ज्यादा इम्पैक्टफुल होता है, उसका इम्पैक्ट बहुत ज्यादा होता है।
उसको क्या कहते हैं, डॉक्यूमेंट करने की भी आवश्यकता है।
ओके सर,
डॉक्यूमेंट करने की आवश्यकता है, क्योंकि ये सारा नॉलेज जो है वो तो लुप्त होता जा रहा है।
जी बिल्कुल बिल्कुल बिल्कुल।
तो ये सारी बातों से मैं बिल्कुल सहमत, सिर्फ एक थोड़ी सी असहमति ये है जब जैसे अब मैं वही कह रहा हूँ कि देखिए वेस्टर्न पैराडाइम जो है वो हमारे ऊपर कॉन्शियस और अनकॉन्शियस तरीके से बहुत जबरदस्त तरीके से हावी है। अब जो आप ये कह रहे हैं कि जो मतलब जो अगर हम कहते हैं कि राइट्स और ड्यूटीज का बैलेंस, आप हमारे पूरे धर्म, आप पूरे ग्रंथ को उठा करके देख लीजिए, ना तो आपको ड्यूटी मिलेगी ना राइट मिलेगा। आप समझ रही हैं बात? तो फिर हम ये क्या करते हैं, हम इसको, अगर हमको पूरे सिस्टम को अगर समझना है
सर तो धर्म को ही तो हम आज के डेट में जो तब धर्म था वो आज हम ड्यूटी बोलते हैं। धर्म तो वही होता है जो धारण करते हैं, जो हम काम करते हैं जी, उसे आज हम ड्यूटी बोलते हैं।
तो गड़बड़ हो गया, वो तो गड़बड़ हो गया, बात तो गड़बड़ हो गई। अब देखिए उसमें दिक्कत क्या है, दिक्कत ये है कि ड्यूटी में, वेस्टर्न वर्ल्ड में ड्यूटी का एक नेगेटिव कॉनोटेशन है, पॉजिटिव रिप्रेजेंटेशन नहीं है उसका। समझ रही है? राइट्स और ड्यूटीज के डायकोटमी में राइट्स प्रिविलेज्ड हैं, ड्यूटी जो है वो सप्रेस्ड।
सर हमारे सिलेबस में सर यही है, कर्तव्य और क्या कहते हैं हमारे अधिकार, ड्यूटी एंड राइट्स।
तो वही तो कह रहा हूँ, हिंदी का शब्द बदलने से पैराडाइम नहीं बदल जाता है।
बिल्कुल सर।
अब सोच करके देखिए, मैं मतलब मैं पते की बात कर रहा हूँ, मैं गूढ़ तो नहीं कहूंगा, अपनी बात को आदमी को नहीं कहना चाहिए गूढ़ बात कह रहा हूँ, लेकिन शायद पते की बात कह रहा हूँ। मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि उसका अनुवाद कर देने से वो शब्द तो नहीं बदल जाते हैं। हमारा पूरा जो सिस्टम था उसको, वो धर्म के आधार पे था। अब धर्म को अगर समझना है तो उसको ड्यूटी आप समझ नहीं सकते हैं। आप धर्म को समझने के लिए आपको उसके रूट में जाना पड़ेगा, ध्री जो जोड़ता है। इनफैक्ट अगर आप मिक्स क्लाउड पे जा करके एक अगर सर्च करेंगी मुझे, तो एक मेरा टॉक है, व्हाई इज हिंदू धर्म मल्टी फैसेटेड। तो हमारे धर्म का जो है वो क्या कहते हैं, इतने मुख्य उसके क्यों है, उसको वेदांतिक पर्सपेक्टिव में मैंने उसको एक्सप्लेन किया है। अब देखिए, अब जितनी चीजों से जुड़ेंगे हम, वो उतना धर्म है। जितने चीजों से हम पृथक हो रहे हैं वो क्या कहते हैं, वो अधर्म है। तो कहने का मतलब है कि हम अगर धर्म को भूल जाएं और धर्म को हम क्या अधिकार या जो भी उसको क्या कहते हैं, उसका जो भी पर्यायवाची हम निकाल दें, तो मुश्किल तो हमने अपने लिए पैदा कर दी। हमको समझने के लिए
बहुत बड़ा गैप है सर, जो लर्निंग है और हमारा जो प्रैक्टिकली जो इम्प्लीमेंट करते हैं सर।
एग्जैक्टली यही कह रहा था कि ये क्रिटिकल एनालिसिस जो है इसको बहुत डीप लेवल पे हम लोगों को करना पड़ेगा। हिंदी के शब्द को यूज करने से, उनके आप अनुवाद कर देने से आप पैराडाइम नहीं बदल देते हैं। यहाँ पैराडाइम जो है वो पैराडाइम हावी है, और हमारे पैराडाइम में जो है वो क्या कहते हैं, वो राइट्स और ड्यूटीज, अधिकार और कर्तव्य जो है वो नहीं था, वो एक अलग दुनिया थी। उस दुनिया में जो है आप जब एक दूसरे के प्रति आप जब धर्म कर रहे हैं तो दूसरे के अधिकार भी जो है वो अकाउंटेड हो जाते थे। आपका स्वधर्म भी था, आपका अपने प्रति भी धर्म था, स्वधर्म की भी बात की गई है। तो सब बाकियों के प्रति तो धर्म है ही, स्वधर्म भी है, जिस बैलेंस को एक समय में इंडियन सोसाइटी ने आके खराब कर दिया, जो भी उसका कारण हो।
इम्प्लीमेंटेशन बेसिस पे जो बेसिक लेवल है सर, मैं ऐसा फील करती हूँ कि एक हमने रेस्ट्रिक्ट कर लिया अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी को, कि हम बिल्कुल जहाँ तक मतलब वो किसको जो कोई लर्नर है या फिर जहाँ वो हम वन वे हो गया सर, कि हमने अपनी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी पूरी कर ली, कि हमें इतना मोनोलॉग टाइप हमने इतना बताना है, हमने वो बता दी। अब सामने वाले ने कितना लिया, कितना सीखा, वो हमारे लिए इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं रह जाता। वो डिफरेंस पहले ऐसा नहीं था सर। जो मैं देखती हूँ कि हमारे पूर्वज या हमारे जो एंसेस्टर थे वो तब तक मेहनत करते थे जब तक कि वो पूरी तरह अपनी बात समझा ना दे।
मैं तो स्वाति जी ये कहूंगा, मैं अपने पिता का उदाहरण देता हूँ। मेरे पिता ने मुझे जीवन में बातों से बहुत कम बातें सिखाई और समझाई।
यस सर, बहुत एक्शन वो हमारी कल्चर में था।
मुझे शाब्दिक ज्ञान उन्होंने दिया ही नहीं है, लेकिन अपने एक्शन से, जिस तरह से वो अपना जीवन व्यतीत करते थे, उन्होंने मुझे बहुत सारी चीजें सिखाई।
इसलिए अगर हम बच्चे को सिखाए कि बड़ों के पैर छुओ, वो नहीं छुएंगे, बट अगर हम करते रहेंगे सर तो बच्चे वो ऑटोमेटिकली अडॉप्ट कर लेते हैं।
एग्जैक्टली।
तो हाँ, एक्टिविटी बेस्ड, तो वही सर मैं बता रही हूँ कि वो अभी बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है, कि ये एक बहुत बड़ा गैप है। तो अगर हमारे पास पिछले जनरेशन के एक्सपीरियंस हैं तो हमें उसको डेफिनेटली उस लेवल तक मेहनत करके उसको फॉरवर्ड करना चाहिए। कि हमें, अगर हमारे बच्चे अगर मंत्र और एंशिएंट चीजों से अगर अवेयर नहीं है या नहीं दे पा रहे हैं जो हमारे पास है, तो ये हमारा फॉल्ट है। हम उस लेवल तक एजुकेशन, उस लेवल का नॉलेज हम अपने घर में भी नहीं पहुंचा पा रहे हैं। और सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि हमारे पास एक बहुत बड़ी चीज है कि हमारे पास शॉर्टेज ऑफ टाइम हो जाता है। हमेशा ब्लेम करते हैं, हमारे पास टाइम नहीं है, हम ये नहीं कर सकते, वो नहीं कर सकते, बच्चे ने नहीं किया। ब्लेम वाली पॉलिसी हमारे पास ज्यादा चलती है, बच्चे ने सीखा ही नहीं। तो एक ये बहुत बड़ा चैलेंज है। आई थिंक हम भी, हमारे जैसे एजुकेटेड लोग भी कभी कभी ये एक्सक्यूज देते हैं। तो ऑन प्रैक्टिकल ग्राउंड हम कहीं ना कहीं अपने ही लर्निंग को मैच नहीं कर पाते, उसके साथ नहीं जा पाते।
एब्सोल्युटली। चेंज तो अपने से ही शुरू होता है। That's the best thing in the process.
बिल्कुल। Yes, sir.
ठीक है स्वाति जी, I'll just take one more question. पद्मा जी का
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू।
You're welcome. और उसके बाद मैं फिर सेशन क्लोज करता हूँ, क्योंकि बात सही है ना, यहाँ 12:30 बजे बंद होना था ना।
जी सर।
जी, तो यहाँ पर अभी 12:45 हो चुका है, लेकिन ठीक है, I will still take one question and then I'll close. Yes, yes, namaste.
I'm working in an engineering institute in the Department of AI and ML. So earlier I was not much aware about Indian knowledge system and its power in all our recent subjects that we study, autonomous robots or AI or machine learning, all these things. Now in these few days after attending the sessions, now I'm feeling that students should also learn about this ancient knowledge and the science which is deeply rooted with our new subjects. So I'm just in a dilemma from last several days that how can I teach this new courses by connecting with this ancient knowledge which is there, because never in the textbooks, whatever the prescribed textbooks and all, we never get connected to that. And as an engineer also, I never connected with the ancient knowledge system, what I learned in these few days. So now,
yeah, Padmaji, if I may answer your question, these are very contextual, questions, in the sense that I would first need to see what you're teaching, what level you're engaging with, what grade you're teaching, what the material is like. Then only, it's like you can make modifications according to
artificial intelligence, the subject. It is deeply rooted with what I identified recently, that it is deeply rooted, it is connected with the ancient technologies. But we never teach in that way.
Yeah, so one has to be very creative about it, one will have to be very creative. See, it is very important that while you're teaching this, it should make sense to the students.
Somewhere some reforms should be there, so that students would also get those kind of knowledge regarding our old traditional system, that science which was there behind this new technology. So normally AICT provides some value-added courses like human ethics and values and gender sensitization, but those courses are practically not taught because they are non-credit courses for us. So we just focus on the engineering courses, and we do not focus on the value-added courses. The 0 credit student has to write the exam and pass. That's enough for them. So really we are lagging in the engineering field. I feel the engineering graduates are getting diverted from this ancient knowledge system. And I came to know that all the IITs are having a section on ITS division is there. So if that kind of division can be planned in all the institutions, and one subject can be made compulsory, then it could have been better to bring the students to the right track.
Yeah, I cannot make any recommendation, because I'm not even in India. So, I mean, these are some of the things that will have to be done locally, So, yeah. Had I been part of the system, perhaps I would have had a better handle on it. See, all that I want to say, to the educators, all the educators here, one needs to teach these things, in such a way that it generates interest in the students. It should come from within, These things are not to be imposed from outside. I do not know how many of you were there in the session that I took, the Guru Shishya Parampara. So I think, all the topics that we covered as far as ideals of teaching, they should be employed, in teaching these materials. They must address the core of an individual. If the students ask you, why should I be learning this? You should have convincing answers, which should appeal to the students. Here, right here, from within. Remember, what I shared in that session, that education is something which comes from within to without. If it gets imposed from outside, it loses its meaning and significance. So I understand that, that we have a huge reservoir of knowledge, but it has to be introduced to the students in very creative ways. Do it in such a way that they feel excited about it. Education, in my understanding, should never feel like a chore. For instance, we have been conversing for close to 4 hours, right? Or maybe more, I don't know, I've lost track of time. If things were not interesting, I do not think we would have been here. With these words, I will close that, that whenever you're teaching Indian knowledge systems, teach it in such a way that the students feel happy and transformed at the end of it. Then it will be effective. Otherwise, it all becomes knowledge of words. It doesn't take us too far. So with that, thank you very much, all of you. It was great, interacting with all of you. Have a great time, and divine willing, our paths will cross once again somewhere.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kundan Singh ji. It was really, I think it's a very blessed opportunity. You helped all of us really reflect on some of the learnings that we've had over the past 15 days, and really how we can use all of this wealth of knowledge in a very personalized way, and how we can bring it out in a meaningful manner. I think thank you so much. It was a really immersive experience for all of us.